Chapter 5. The Truth Behind the Emperor. Dhamrada, alone as he watched over one of the 8 gates, couldn't help but wonder, why did it turn out like this? Things couldn't be any worse. Yuki had fallen into the hands of Emperor Ludora, deprived of his free will like all of his friends. Ludora had ordered Dhamrada to watch over them all, and he was in no position to defy him. Now, however, Ludora had given another order. Yuki would be watched by someone else, and once the handover was done, he was to board the Emperor's flagship. So began that great air battle. Single digits ranked 6th or higher were allowed to learn the true identity of the marshal, but they could tell no one else. That was an absolute order, the information so vitally confidential that Dhamrada, whose business frequently took him to foreign lands, had his memories manipulated for extra security. Yes, I made a promise to him, and that was... Dhamrada recalled it once he saw the marshal reveal herself. Many more memories followed, coming back vividly. He had previously recalled the most important promise he had made to Ludora, but now he remembered the reason it was so important to execute on it. Well, now why? There was no time to stew over it. The demon Lord Rimuru, whom he had seen not long ago, was a very nice person, one who didn't seem much of a threat. Once he was captured in Velgrin's alternate dimension, he shouldn't have been able to interfere with their measures to capture Veldora. And now, indeed, Veldora was completely dominated, giving Ludora a decisive advantage over Gaia. But this was of no importance to Dhamrada, or to Ludora even. With a clarity of thought that felt like a thick fog being lifted, Dhamrada began wondering what was truly best for Ludora. But before he could answer that question, the demon Lord Rimuru made his move. Truly unprecedented violence. Why did he ever think he wasn't a threat? Dhamrada wished he could interrogate himself over that. The fact he made it out of Velgrin's seal made it no doubt that he was a force to be reckoned with. But more than that, the moment Dhamrada saw Rimuru appear, he realized just how naïve he had been. The demon lord had taken one look at him and the rest with his golden eyes. It was a glare, a cold one, as if he didn't even recognize Dhamrada as his enemy. Kondo immediately stepped up to respond, but his attack didn't work. Is that all you have? Then I don't even need to be wary of you. All of you can wait for later. Have fun being terrorized. And try not to get killed until I can deal with you. That was the story Rimuru's eyes seemed to tell. To him, Dhamrada and the others were as good as dead already. Emperor Ludora was no exception to this. If things kept going this way, they'd all doubtlessly be killed. But what did tactical victory mean for Rimuru in this situation? It meant fulfilling 2 conditions. 1. Recapture Veldora. 2. Eliminate the invaders. Veldora was the demon lord's staunchest ally. For Rimuru, him losing his free will couldn't be allowed to stand. If he had come all the way over here, he must have been prepared to deal with Velgrin. And from Dhamrada's point of view, there was no predicting the outcome of that battle. It was a vast contest in some far-off land, and he had no way of analyzing it. So what about eliminating the invaders? People called Rimuru a pacifist, but that didn't make him non-violent. His lands had been subject to numerous invasions in the past, and he had repelled all of them, by any means he saw fit. Thanks to Veldora's help, the land of monsters had a long string of victories. Rimuru would never forgive the Empire's acts of aggression. The time for negotiation was over. For him, the only course of action was to kill every single Imperial soldier. Bargaining in the face of this was meaningless. The only way out was to fight to the bitter end. Even worse, they had signed no previous agreement over this war, which meant there was no guarantee that surrender would bring forgiveness. The Empire, seeing no point in such actions, set a trap for Rimuru when he came to negotiate. Their trust was ruined, and it could be concluded that no further talks would ever be agreed to. We should have made much more of an effort to stop His Majesty. Dhamrada, too, had grossly overestimated the Empire's fighting ability. He saw no way they could lose, so he assumed they could dictate whatever terms of victory they wanted. He wanted to show off the Empire's strength, smash his opponents, and swallow them up before they showed any signs of rebellion. They could replace their leadership, establish a puppet state, whatever they wanted, as long as they won the war. This was how the Empire expanded its territory, but this time they made a great miscalculation. Not only were the two sides evenly matched on the battlefield, there was no guarantee even Emperor Ludora would be safe. It was no wonder why Damrada felt so depressed. It should be noted that Damrada's primary concern was the promise he made to Ludora. There was no doubt in his mind that Rimuru wanted the Emperor dead as well, and that made Damrada wonder what the right course of action for him could be. He wanted to keep that promise to Ludora, but it was something he wanted to achieve with his own two hands. But, defeating Rimuru seemed so impossible. Damrada shivered a bit as he analyzed the issue. Their flagship had been surrounded by terrifying magic, with the survivors now protecting the 8 gates. Could you really call this fighting as equals? Because to him, this looked like nothing but a dreadful error. That brought us to now. Did I keep you waiting? Before Damrada's eyes was a young girl smiling happily. She was one of the 7 primal demons, one bearing unbelievable strength. Ultima, servant of the demon Lord Rimuru. He has primals serving under him, and he's even granted them power. She was an even more awesome sight up close. The accuracy and power of that fearsome death streak was far beyond what it used to be, proving that the demons had indeed been evolved. Rimuru had opened a massive gate to summon them all, not even caring about all the eyewitnesses, and then he did something to everyone there. There had been no time to investigate exactly what, but Ultima had now given them a firm answer. The demon looked amused with herself. Ah ha 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 ha! You figured it out, huh? Well, that's right. So Rimuru gave me a bunch of power, and now I'm feeling really good. It was a nice anecdote for Ultima. To Damrada, it was his worst nightmare. Giving power to a primal. There was no way a mere demon lord could do that as much as he predicted it himself. Not even Guy Crimson had evolved the primals under his control, which made clear just how extraordinary the demon lord Rimuru's actions were. But that didn't stop Damrada from trying to defeat him. He had to fulfill his promise to Ludora, and as part of that he was obliged to go all out against the demon Ultima. You know, I have not always strived for the very best. Even if I have to choose a much harder path, as long as I can fulfill my goal at the end, that's all that matters. Damrada stopped worrying. Even looking at Ultima and all the overwhelming force she boasted, he stood strong, never growing timid. Still up for this, huh? Of course. I am one of my master's knights, and I will show you my power to the fullest. Great. Can't wait. Let's get started then. Thus began the battle between Damrada, second ranked of the single digits, and the Pain Lord Ultima. Ultima chuckled as she observed Damrada. She could feel his power, an incredible amount for a human being, and exceptional even as a saint. If she hadn't been evolved, this might not have been winnable for her. I know this. He's about equal with Hinata, huh? And she was like a natural enemy to all monsters, but it looks to me like this guy's honed himself purely against humans, and individual targets for that matter. His type certainly can be a nuisance. Ultima knew that people who improved and invented their own abilities, rather than have them granted by others, were a pain. Hakuro was a good example of that, someone who could use a seemingly boundless number of techniques to handle any situation in his way. Adapting and applying those skills was the secret to his strength and to higher forms of existence like herself. It was an alien concept. Demons existed on a much higher plane of existence than people. All they needed to do was release a little magic force, and that itself became an attack. That was true of Ultima, who stood at the very top of the demon race. She was born an expert on magic manipulation, the perfect control of magic force, and she didn't have to work for it at all. Any wish she had instantly came true. That's what magic was, and no one could dare hope to compete against its overwhelming versatility. Until fairly recently, Ultima believed the only adversaries who could beat her were other primals or wild cards like True Dragon. But this belief was mistaken, something she discovered during her battle with Velgrind. She and her cohorts put up a good fight against her despite being far outclassed. They even beat one of her separate bodies, although even that only had about 10% of Velgrind's strength. At the same time, however, they discovered that using their power the wrong way could get them defeated by a lower-ranked opponent. The battles that followed offered a great many lessons. True dragons, already the most powerful beings in the world, exhibited highly precise, sophisticated magic manipulation that allowed them to fully overwhelm Ultima and the demonesses despite their own magic skill. Ultima had no idea how Velgrind pulled that off mid-battle, but now she did. The secret lay in applying an ultimate skill to your magic. An ultimate skill gives you a lot more precision over your magic control, right? No wonder we couldn't beat her at all. Velgrind was doing little more than keeping the demonesses at bay, but even that was too much for Ultima to overcome back then. And for Carrera, a self-styled magic expert, seeing someone handle it so much better than her was a humiliation. Yes, a humiliation, but also a stroke of good luck. She enjoyed the opportunity to experience that battle, and she survived without tasting a decisive defeat. Never until now did Ultima consider that simply incorporating the effects of a skill into magic could potentially double its power. Now that this battle was behind her, she was quickly realizing some new possibilities. True, we've got a very good foundation, but that doesn't mean we should rely on it too much. A little innovation, and we can get even stronger. Ultima, as the strongest of them all, had never held much of a craving for power. This time, though, she sincerely wanted it for herself. If someone already near invincible strove for even greater heights through hard work and study, how much stronger could they get? The answer to this question probably lay in Velgrind, her and Guy Crimson, no doubt. Along those lines, Diablo, constantly pursuing his own interests over anything else, was probably a wild card. It was completely different from Ultima and Carrera, who had never made an effort at anything before. Testarossa was another story. Ultima was aware that she was the most inexperienced out of the 7 primals, but even so she felt she could fight as an equal with Miziri or Rain. When it came to Testarossa and Carrera in a serious fight, though, she didn't like her chances. Testarossa was perfect and elegant all the way. She was confident, even with her bad habit of looking down on others. Carrera was arrogant and sloppy, capable of perfection if she wanted it, but prone to losing interest and phoning it in instead. So, what did that make Ultima? She couldn't control magic as precisely as Testarossa, or throw around magic force the way Carrera could. Out of the 3 devil lords, she was probably bringing up the rear. Everything was just halfway there at best with her. She was a wellspring of talent, but she never enthusiastically applied herself to anything. In that way, she was similar to Carrera in many respects. That's why they competed as rivals for so long. But now Carrera had taken up a new hobby, swordsmanship. It only made Ultima jealous. But that would end today. Ultima was blessed with the opportunity to awaken, and now she had the power she wished for. And I'm the one with the most room for growth among us all, right? Now that she was thinking this way, it all seemed like a pretty funny story to her. It was all thanks to Rimuru, her master, and while Ultima had no idea how the Demon Lord could do that, it didn't matter to her. All that mattered was whether she could attain a higher plane of existence or not, that and whether she could prove useful to Rimuru. She continued to wish as she watched over Agira's battle, and at the end of all that pondering, she heard what she thought was a voice. "Allow me to help you give shape to that wish a little." This was the ultimate skill Samael, Lord of Deathly Poison. It could detect the weaknesses of any living thing and create a suitable poison to target them. And now that Ultima had this power, she felt she had no chance of losing to anyone. But then, she remembered, wasn't that what Diablo had always told her? To hone her skills and not rely too much on her latent power? She had been losing frequently to Zegian around that time, so she assumed Diablo was just giving her a hard time. He was mean that way. But Ultima had it all wrong. He was probably being sarcastic, yes, but he had her best interests in mind when he said it. He was teaching her, in essence, that the right control over your power could make a world of difference. And once that got through to Ultima, a lot of Diablo's other advice popped into her mind. You can't truly acquire the power you've been given just by calling on it in a pinch. That's really true. Now Ultima was deeply convinced. She was told that not long after she was granted her name, and now she thought it was really true. Come to think of it, Diablo never really used the powers Sir Rimuru gave him, not unless things were real bad. I thought he just didn't see his enemies as worthy of tasting those attacks, but maybe he had a good reason. So why not her too, then? Thus, Ultima decided to use this opportunity as a way for her to grow. This man Damrada would be a tricky opponent after all, so he'd be the perfect target to give her all again. Look at Diablo trying to train us by making us fight like this. He really does look down on all of us, doesn't he? If Testa finds that out, she's going to cause a lot of trouble for us, huh? But then again, maybe Testa went along with it. But since we're here and all, I might as well take advantage. Even Damrada, a doubtlessly strong opponent, was merely a training partner to Ultima. She was determined to use her ultimate skill against him, the product of her long-held wishes to win this out, and she was sure it'd be a growing experience for her. So she swore to herself that she'd win, not with the power she had without asking, but by perfectly applying the ability she had obtained through her own desire. Then, she thought, she could prove it. She wouldn't be wishing it any longer. She really would be useful to Rimuru. The battle was reaching its peak intensity. Ultima had the power advantage with her attacks, but Damrada's techniques parried them away. Occasionally, he could even focus his entire body's fighting spirit to cancel out the attack head-on. That was the fundamental power of Damrada, thinking on his feet and never wasting a movement. It was honestly impressive and fascinating to Ultima. It helped her realize a great many things mid-battle. I see, so this kind of flow won't put you off balance. I bet this would work on Zegian as well. Zegian was just too much. The moment Ultima approached him, she'd get knocked to the ground. On the field, battle training was one thing, but when it came to martial arts practice, he wasn't a suitable sparring partner. Along those lines, Damrada was a nice, approachable rival, the best person for her to fight against. Now Ultima realized how fortunate she was. With overwhelming magical power, she could easily defend against any attack, and on offense, she could crush any enemy by brute force alone. She thought she knew that, but now it actually began to feel that way. And as both sides increased their power, the battle grew more and more ferocious. The powers were so closely balanced, there was no telling when the battle was going to end, or at least it seemed that way at a glance. What fun! I never would have lasted this long in a training session with Zegian. Ultima looked like she was truly enjoying herself. Damrada, by contrast, looked like this whole affair disgusted him. You treat a fight against me as a training session? You truly do look down upon me. But despite his words, even Damrada knew it deep down. If this kept up, he would be the one who lost. Ultima was still growing, but Damrada was already giving her everything he had, all of his technique at once. There was no time to enjoy this. All that mattered was how he would ever defeat her. Primals, after all, were like the chosen ones of magic. No half-hearted attack could ever work against someone capable of writing the physical laws of this planet. Only through applying the ultimate enchantment alternate to all of his attacks could Damrada inflict any damage on Ultima. He had spent over 2 millennia training himself, growing capable of using this borrowed power the way you or I breathe. It was so familiar to Damrada now that he had all but forgotten Ludora had lent it to him in the first place. Besides, demons had certain checks placed on them. There was a set limit to their magicule counts, although that seemed to be unlocked at the moment. As a result, someone, same class like Damrada, had more overall energy on hand than Ultima, hence why he could keep it even with her. The more I attack, the more I expose my hand after all. But I doubt any of my more powerful finishers would work against her anyway. So I can't win? Damrada expended a bone-crushing effort to acquire his technique, but Ultima could just steal it after a single glance. It would have been better if he went on a quick attack to end this in a hurry, but he knew that could leave him open and vulnerable to self-imploding. Ultima was still launching multiple attacks at once, all with the same mind-boggling force, and he was still cancelling them all out at the same time, but that didn't seem to frustrate his foe. In fact, Ultima looked happy. That's so good! Like a textbook example. Being told that made Damrada far more frustrated instead. He was in the corner. Not only was he in no position to hold anything back, but as soon as he showed any new move, he could feel Ultima growing off of it like a pile of dry sand sucking up water. All I can do is laugh. It was true. Damrada had no idea that primals were such terrifying things. An external observer would think their abilities were balanced against each other, but that balance was about to fall apart shortly. As long as one side of the fight continued growing, the scales were bound to tip sooner or later. That was the stark reality, and now the moment was here. Now I'm really starting to get it. The change in Ultima's mood was clear as she shouted it. Until now, she had been storing up her powers so she could focus on stealing Damrada's move. Now that power was released, and behind her sprouted 6 pairs of featherless, bat-like wings, a shining light purple in color. Here we go. Now! With that, the 12 wings began to move at once, changing shape in a multitude of ways as they aimed themselves at Damrada. Some were thin as blades, some sharp as needles, some formed fist-like mounds. The constant changes made it difficult to even attempt a mad dash away from them, much less try to deal with them. Damrada, trying to parry a fist-like wing, was blown away once the fists crossed each other. The power was incomparable to anything before, too severe for Damrada to cancel out, and it was increasing rapidly. There was no longer any upper limit to her magicule count, and no sign of this rapid increase slowing down at all. She could make herself literally as powerful as she wished. Esk! Ah, ha, ha. I just love that kind of facial expression. Don't sass me, little girl. Your power is amazing, but it doesn't matter if you can't hit me. Damrada had required more focus than ever before to avoid that attack. He acted unaffected, but inside he began to feel a sense of deep urgency. If this continued, there was no way to win, but Ultima left no holes open. If she didn't, Damrada would just have to poke one open, and so he resorted to desperate action. One of the wings pierced Damrada's leg. It looked like a failure on his part, but that was exactly what his strategy was. A race like the demons, prone to boasting about their mighty power, was just as prone to arrogance. Even Ultima would let this put her off guard, and if Damrada could catch that, he was sure of victory. Ah, ha, ha. I thought you were gonna just keep dodging me. Oh, did you get tired? With a wicked grin, Ultima relaxed her attack and began taunting Damrada. Her wings went on the move, plunging into his limbs, but not his vitals. Yes, I know it. You're all strong. That's why you look down upon us and dig your own graves at the final moment. Damrada was sure his plan would succeed. Then, pretending to be wounded and fallen, he unleashed an all-out strike against Ultima. Holy Smash Fist! This was his most powerful of finisher moves, a skill that took all his fighting spirit as a saint and used alternate to compress it into a single strike. Even the most powerful, evil demon would be permanently extinguished by it, and without a body to inhabit, Ultima the Primal would be forced to vanish. Damrada felt he had won, but there would be no victorious afterglow today. Just as he was about to finish Ultima off, he felt a chill for some reason. All that fell away was a single wing. It seemed to change shape, imitating Ultima herself, but Damrada couldn't see it. And then it was too late. Poison Smash Fist! Ultima had punched through Damrada's chest. Her hand was infused with an enormous amount of magic force as she executed an open-hand spear strike, much as Damrada had. But with the ultimate skill Samael added to the mix, she was able to control it perfectly, the deathly poison from Samael turning her 5 fingernails a dark purple. It was well beyond a lethal dose, and it crushed Damrada's defenses. Damrada fell, vomiting blood. Ah, ha, ha. Too bad, huh? I was right on target. The evil laughter echoed. Damrada tried getting up again, but failed. His entire body was so drained of energy that he could barely close a fist, much less stand up. But still he gathered his strength and stared at Ultima. That is no smash fist, you fool. It was a spear hand strike. As if you could copy me after just one look, but the power behind it was excellent. Call it bloody death hand instead, perhaps. Damrada gazed upward, a satisfied look on his face, as he beheld the sky and remorsefully chuckled to himself. He was completely defeated. Long before he could challenge Guy to a final battle, the Demon Lord Rimuru's forces had crushed him. Perhaps some of the Empire's elites would survive, but it would be impossible to rebuild their position. Emperor Ludora has no time left to wait for the next opportunity. Before that, he needs to. Your Majesty, Damrada muttered, looking back on his life. Will you listen to me, Damrada? What is it? If it's more boring complaining, please save it for Lady Velgrind. Or are you complaining at her, actually? Then bring it to her, not me. I don't want her to think I have a grievance with her too. You really are a cold person, aren't you? But no, this is serious. What is it? He didn't want to know. He knew from the moment he looked into Ludora's eyes that this was a serious matter, but if he heard about it, their current relationship would cease to exist, and Damrada didn't want that. So it appears that every time I reincarnate, it wears my heart out a little bit. That or the soul, the way Guy describes it. But either way, if this goes on long enough, I may wind up not being me any longer. The resurrections of the hero Ludora were not magical in nature. They involved a special ritual, crafted to help the new body inherit the old one's overblown magic force. This was the cost for becoming both a god among mankind and the owner of a force that even surpassed that of a true dragon, the ultimate spiritual life form. It was up to Ludora and his own skills to manage that process. Damrada had no solution for him. The wearing of the soul, you say? And it would cause your Majesty to cease being yourself? Right. That's a funny joke. But I'm not so naive as to take it seriously and reduce your workload, you know. Eesh. Still all serious like that, huh? I think that's what I'm best at, yes? Maybe so, yeah. Well, forget about it. Stupid to ask anyway. I will do just that then. There was no forgetting. Damrada was just running away from it. He wanted to serve Ludora forever, maintaining the current relationship they had. So time passed. Ah, I knew it. Every time I'm reborn, it seems, I lose something important to me little by little. The problem is, I don't even know what. Your Majesty. Hey, Damrada. Yes. This is an order. When I am no longer myself, I want you to kill me by your own hand. Emperor Ludora. I can't really ask Velgrin to do it, can I? Damrada struggled mightily to keep himself from saying he couldn't do it either. This was the heartfelt wish of his best friend Ludora. There was no way he could deny him. That is a terribly weak-minded thing for you to say, my liege. But should that happen, I promise you that I will settle your affairs for you. So please, I hope you can rest assured as you go about your political duties. You never change, do you? Then it's settled. It was a promise made on a distant day, and time marched on again. I am tired. I can only keep Michael, Lord of Justice, from going out of control for so long. Absolute justice is no better than evil when you get down to it, for there's no such thing as a justice that can be accepted by all. Your Majesty. Damrada, do you remember your promise with me? Of course I do, my liege. Ludora smiled. Good then. He changed his expression, giving a stern order. Damrada, I hereby order you, you must find someone who can overcome Michael, Lord of Justice, and defeat me should you yourself fail at it. It pains me to ask you to do this, but while I am still myself, I need to take all possible precaution. The order was tantamount to Ludora asking Damrada to wipe him from existence, but Damrada had no choice but to nod. You have my word, Your Majesty. Thank you, Ludora replied. And my apologies. His eyes pointed far away, his speech pointed toward no particular target. This Michael was entrusted to me by a friend, but looking back, it might have been too much power for me. Whether I win or lose my game against Guy, I think next time will be the last occasion I ever use it. I intend to use it well, but if you see any signs of it going out of control, please do not hesitate. Stop it, and stop me as well. Yes, my liege. Please. Ludora closed his eyes, recalling the oath he had given to Veldanova the Star King Dragon long ago and feeling frustrated at his inability to keep it. A small murmur escaped from his mouth. If you fail at this promise, I will apologize to you in the afterlife. Damrada, pretending not to hear it, quietly left the room. Choking on the blood seeping out from his own mouth, Damrada was brought back to reality. He seemed to have lost consciousness for a few tenths of a second. Your Majesty, I owe you an apology. You gave me your orders and I failed to fulfill them. In his inner consciousness, already threatening to fade again, Damrada attempted to state an apology. But it was not to be. All he did was cough up blood again. There was regret, but there was also relief. To Damrada, the edict to seek out someone to kill his beloved master was nothing but pain. It had made him suffer for far too long. And of course it would, because to Damrada, Emperor Ludora was every bit the brilliant hero he had always been. How could I ever kill the one who I value so much? Why did it have to be me? Couldn't it have been someone else? Without you, I would have no lingering regrets about this world. I would gladly join you on your journey to the afterlife. That was what Damrada truly felt. The game between Ludora and Guy was of no importance to him. What mattered was Ludora's will and the way that will was reflected by the world. Guy Crimson was an arrogant demon lord, but he was no tyrant who refused to listen to reason. His rule was absolute, but he still worked on a proper framework of rules that he stuck to. He and Ludora had different ideals, but they weren't incompatible with each other. From Damrada's point of view, they could have come to a mutually acceptable agreement. Guy would never move on his own. Ludora was sure of it. That must have been why he issued his orders to Damrada. But if they understood each other that well, why did they even bother keeping up with this game? It made Damrada wonder, but there was no way he could disobey Ludora, so in the end he carried the order out. The journey would bring him all around the world, but after leaving the Emperor's side for many years, he found the right candidate. This was Yuki Kagurazaka, a boy who had the extremely unusual ability anti-skill. Even ultimate skills could be nullified by this, Damrada was overjoyed to find. He was glad to find something that could work against Michael, Lord of Justice, but the results were disastrous. Yuki was now square in Ludora's hands and could no longer be relied upon. So Damrada lost his ace in the hole, but now another question arose. Why did His Majesty try to rule over Yuki? Ultima reacted to the unintended murmuring. Damrada didn't answer it. Ludora himself ordered Damrada to find someone who could kill him. Why would he then interfere with that effort? Or maybe Damrada just didn't want to admit it. The signs were there from the beginning. So it really was true, His Majesty Emperor Ludora, he's already... Damrada kept muttering as if suffering from a high fever. What you talking about? Ultima was sounding clearly irritated, but her voice would never reach him. He was far too absorbed in his own thoughts, a pre-death moment of clarity. His mind was sharper than ever, and now it could arrive at the truth. Ludora burned with his ideals, his drive to unite the world and establish a lasting peace. He dreamed of an end to conflict and poverty and the rise of a more developed mankind. Only when the entire world was united and at peace could everyone live as true equal. Believing this, Ludora set out to establish a united nation. He believed humans have the innate ability to understand each other, and from the bottom of his heart he knew they could all unite under one will to create a better world. So he became a hero, serving all mankind, facing great hardship as he did. He never stopped pursuing his struggle, hoping it would bring smiles to the faces of as many people as possible. And Damrada loved him for it. But even now, Ludora's ideals had ended while they were still a dream. He himself had changed too much before the day that dream came true. The ideals we pursued were crushed long ago. Damrada finally had to admit it. It wrapped his mind in sadness. Are you crying? Yes. Because you're afraid to die. No. My promise. Your promise? Yes. Inescapable death had Damrada in its hands, refusing to let go. He could accept that much as inevitable. Yet the one thing he couldn't stand was not being able to keep his promise to Ludora. But if Ludora's original will was long gone, then who really was Ludora now? There was just one answer. It was the ultimate skill, Michael, Lord of Justice, unchanged from when Veldhanava the Star King Dragon gave it to him. Damrada needed to carry out Ludora's orders before his spirit fully collapsed, but his life was running out before that could ever happen. He wanted to curse his own incompetence, but even now he decided the situation was not at its worst. He had to stop Michael at all costs, and if he failed, he needed to find someone to entrust the task to. That was Ludora's order to him, the promise he had to keep, and he had found Yuki for that. But there was one other candidate he had in mind. Rimuru, the fearsome demon lord, his greatest enemy and also his greatest hope. I want you to kill His Majesty, kill Ludora for me. Why me? It doesn't have to be you. Can you at least relay the message to the demon lord Rimuru for me? Oh, let me do the honors. 'Cause I'm sure open to taking the job. I was planning to kill that Ludora guy anyway. Ultima was always up for satisfying a new whim. She wasn't going to take this job for free, but she did have a liking for Damrada. They had fought for only a short time, but for someone with an infinite lifespan like Ultima, battle was about quality over quantity anyway. This was an intense battle, packed with ups and downs from start to finish, and after that experience, she was willing to forgive just about everything. Then Let me ask you one more favor. What? What? Protect him, protect the boy Masayuki. Damrada was fully convinced. Masayuki was the one. Well, sure, I guess. But you got a reward for me, right? Demons never worked for free. That wasn't an absolute rule. There were plenty of loopholes, but Ultima was feeling selfish. She wanted to annoy Damrada a little, so that's the approach she took. But the question still relieved Damrada. He felt a new peace, like his heart had been freed. Your reward is all of me. I entrust you with my soul and all of my skills, etched deep into my body. Mama, that'll work, I guess. Ultima reluctantly agreed, making Damrada break out in a smile. And then, Your Majesty, I will come to you now. Those were Damrada's last words. He breathed his last and died as if falling asleep. So the curtain finally came down on the long life of Damrada, Lord of the Fist, former Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Nazca, and close personal friend of its united Emperor, Ludora Nam-ul-Nazca. Now Ultima stood alone in the battle arena of an alternate dimension. Well, that's no fun. His heart core disappeared on me. I was going to offer it to Surimuru, too. Despite that saddened muttering, Ultima still gently wrapped Damrada's body in her 12 wings. As they agreed upon, she took all of him as her own, and that was the end of the battle between the two. One Lord of the Fist ended his life, and a new demon of the Fist was born. Damrada, at the very end of his life, had given one of the worst demons in history one of the most dreadful powers known to mankind. If he knew about this, would it have filled him with shame? Or would he be happy to learn that his craft would be used by a third generation? Now that Damrada was gone, there was no way to know. It would be up to the survivors to carefully weigh the fallout. Well, I suppose I'll be dealing with you then. Agara made the announcement to Kondo, standing in the center of the arena. Kondo's eyebrows twitched as he silently placed a hand on his sword. He didn't answer Agera, but instead glanced over at Carrera. Don't worry. I'll serve as an observer. Don't make me laugh. As if I could ever trust you. Kondo finally opened his mouth, and his words were scathing. If they were both his enemy anyway, he was saying, they might as well both tackle him at the same time. But Carrera was unaffected. No, maybe not, I suppose. I don't see 2-on-1 as a coward move, and nobody's going to go easy on you here. This time, though, it's what Agera wished for. So please don't worry about me. Enjoy yourselves. Having had her say, she sat down atop the stone wall around the arena, like this was no longer any of her business. Kondo shrugged. What a farce, but I respect your spirit at least. Then he drew his military sword and faced up to Agera. My thanks. Now, let's get down to... Agera was interrupted by a hollow bang. He fell to the ground, clutching his chest. You... Carrera, closing the distance in an instant, flew in between the pair. Kondo's sword, which was even now about to descend upon Agera's head, was stopped by her blade. You were fast enough at this speed. Kondo, the still smoking Nambu semi-automatic handgun in his left hand and his military-issue sword in the right, looked straight at Carrera. You thought I would, wouldn't I? If you were serious about your business, Agera would have been destroyed. Am I wrong? Kondo had never explicitly stated that he would accept a match with Agera. It was Agera's fault for failing to confirm his intentions. Besides, he made far too feeble an effort to truly finish him off, something Carrera, who parried his blade, innately understood. Someone as strong as Kondo would never have lost in a head-on battle against Agera. If it were fought with swords alone, maybe they could have had a lively pitched battle, but even so, Kondo's victory was unassailable. But Kondo opted for a surprise attack instead because he knew Carrera was waiting in the wings. It would be ridiculous to ever trust the words of a demon, and even more foolish to heed the words of a demon. That was the ironclad rule of warfare. Eliminate all the uncertainties you can. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't have all day, you know. I don't have to put up with your farcical nonsense. Kondo sniffed at Carrera as if this was all below his standard. Well, if you say so. But if you're interested, I could serve as your next opponent with that sword. Kondo pointed at Carrera's blade. It had been cracked by the blow, and Carrera herself knew a few more good blows would break it entirely. Oh, of course not. I can replace it, but I have something better than that. I think you know what I'm talking about, Agara. Of course. A pity that I could not cross swords with a practitioner from my own school, but this too is following my teaching. I have no reason to complain, but I cannot say I like how you disarmed me with such obvious disdain. Agara stood up as he spoke. The hole in his chest was already closed. Kondo had shot him with an eraser bullet, which absorbs and eliminates the target's energy equivalent to the amount of magic force imbued in it. If it had been a necrosis bullet, Agara would have great difficulty standing up right now. As Carrera correctly guessed, and as Agara realized now, Kondo clearly didn't give him his best effort. But it meant Agara could still fight. Blade transform. He transformed into a sword, and needless to say, it was Carrera who took it up. Her magic force filled Agara, refilling his lost energy. The blade shone, indicating that Agara's spiritual force was back to full. A foolish move. I only let you off the hook because you lived by the sword, much as myself. My kind love to fight, all right? The exact method is none of your business. I see. Well, it's not important now. That person committed the unforgivable sin of deceiving our school's founder, and I will do everything in my power to make you pay. To Kondo, Carrera was just as guilty for holding Agara in her hand. The hostility was clear in his voice as he took his stance. About an hour into the fight, Carrera was on her knees. Kondo was strong, unbelievably so, truly a master. To Carrera, he was a monster beyond imagination. And she knew she was good, but she now understood that there was always someone better out there. She might not have been able to defeat Diablo, but she knew that she'd never lose to anyone else. But Zygian had little trouble dispatching her, and during this war, she put up a pathetic performance against Velgrin, so she wasn't surprised that Kondo was making quick work of her. In fact, she was thrilled by it. Carrera rolled on the ground, putting some distance between herself and Kondo. Then she stood up, her sword pointed straight ahead. Not bad. Agara praised my sword skills a lot, but I sure can't hold a candle to you. Silence. That gets on my nerves, considering you've been fending me off by sheer force alone. Kondo, too, had an ominous feeling about Carrera's fighting sense. Now was no time for pussyfooting around, so he had gone all out from the beginning, not just with his sword strikes, but with a generous amount of the ultimate skill Sandalphon, Lord of Judgment, sprinkled in. But he still couldn't fully finish off Carrera, something he inwardly found both amazing and horrifying. They had both recognized each other as worthy opponents by now, and from there the battle raged even more fiercely. Carrera struck Kondo with a forceful blow, blocking his attempted slash. Kondo lightly parried the move, aiming at Carrera with the gun in his right hand. Loaded inside was a dispel bullet, built to disable the target's magic, and what Carrera did next explained why Kondo felt the need to fire it. Without a moment of spell-casting time, a gravitational force field was built around the arena. Kondo had chided Carrera as nothing but brute strength a moment ago, but instead of taking that to heart, she just tapped her strength even more. This invocation wouldn't affect her at all, but it would do a great deal to slow Kondo's movements, or so she hoped. Anticipating this, Kondo chose to counteract it with a dispel bullet. His strength lay very much in the versatility of his skills. The ultimate skill Sandalphon had 4 effects in all, and he could tap into one or the other depending on what the times called for. The removal bullet broke down its target's defensive barriers. The dispel bullet blacked out magical effects. The necrosis bullet destroyed magic-based healing, and the eraser bullet was a highly precise magical strike, identifying the target's essence and consuming its energy from the inside. All of these abilities could also be placed together in a single, all-powerful shot. The judgment bullet. Up to now, Carrera was still daring enough to cast magical attacks that required spellcasting time. That was in the past now, but even so, all of her spells were being cancelled out the moment the magic invoked itself. Kondo had an accurate beat on her, and he wasn't making any mistaken choices. What's more, he could fire any kind of bullet he wanted whenever the opportunity came up. If she couldn't assess and deal with them, even a single one could be a painful blow to Carrera. One moment off her guard and the duel would be over instantly. Kondo was carefully analyzing this battle, not letting his emotions get the better of him. It was a mechanical approach even. Spot the enemy's weak points, figure out the flow of magical power, and take suitable countermeasures. That was all there was to it. But by sticking to the fundamentals, Kondo had reached his position as strongest in the imperial armies. That made him the exact opposite of the emotionally driven Carrera, but still, they were also similar in some ways. "You're a pain in the ass," Carrera said, shaking her head before asking in a friendly manner, "How do you know when I'll cast magic?" Kondo gathered his breath as he replied, "Hey, it's simple. I just thought about what I would do in your situation." A very simple explanation. Once again, Carrera found herself liking Kondo, but at the same time, she grew increasingly aware that this was an adversary like none other. He's reading the magic flow required to cast a spell, then cutting it off with complete precision. And that's how he phrases it. Come on! What I would do sounded like such a trite excuse, but even as she bitterly mused over that, she couldn't hide the joy on her face. Having an opponent you could fight at full force against was sheer bliss. The demon Lord Leon, for example, was a fighter whose strengths even Guy attested to. She expected a satisfying fight against him, but he refused to take the bait on her provocation. It was tremendously frustrating and disappointing, but if she had Kondo now, she could enjoy herself to her heart's content. To her, after all, the process of the fight was far more important than the outcome. "Well, good, very good. Kondo was your name, right? You're the greatest enemy I could ever want." Kondo just sniffed away the praise, preferring to express his opinions with his sword instead of his tongue. He slashed at Carrera, and even this left-handed single-hand strike was true. A truly beautiful demonstration from a master swordsman, and Carrera had to rely on both Agera's skill and her own intuition to parry the barrage. After a while of this, a certain habit of Kondo's began to dawn on Carrera. His left hand held the sword, the other his gun. That was his fighting style. But when he fired his gun, his eyes and finger muscles would involuntarily move in tandem, revealing the bullet's trajectory. It was a tiny quirk, something only Carrera could have ever spotted, but the flaw was still fatal enough to potentially decide the fight. Yeah. With perfect timing, Carrera swung his sword away. Kondo, about to fire a gunshot, failed to immediately respond, and despite himself, he held out his gun to catch Carrera's sword. His reaction speed was up there with the best in the world, but it wasn't enough to stop her. "Let's see you pick on me now. I've just taken away one of your weapons." Thanks to the twisted, off-balance stance he took to stop Carrera, he couldn't fully resist the demon's powerful strike. It wound up costing him his gun. The Nambu semi-automatic clattered to the ground. Carrera was delighted to have this bit of revenge against Kondo. But then something gave her the creeps. As soon as she felt it, Carrera followed her instincts and jumped back from the spot. Kondo's sword cleaved through the air. Missed my chance. The next thing that fell to the ground was Carrera's severed left arm. Not even her aurical skeleton could resist the force behind Kondo's blade. You... Carrera was enraged, but her heart remained calm enough to recognize the reality of this situation, even though she was trembling in humiliation. Now she knew that she'd never defeat Kondo like this. And as if to prove it, Kondo was now holding his military sword with both hands. It was a complete picture of beauty. He seemed like a completely different person from before. He had no intention of relying on his gun from the beginning, and now Carrera understood that he was trying to create an opening to lure her into all along. Once again, Kondo had been looking down on her the entire time. He was at least an even match for her with his blade alone, but instead he was putting on this show the whole time to hide it. He was hoping to take me down easy with that, I'm sure, but even a master like him's using dirty tricks instead of showing off his full talent. I find that hard to forgive. It made Carrera let out a shout. "How dare you, damned human beings, berate us!" In a fit of rage, Carrera took a step forward to tear Kondo to pieces. But at that moment, "Lady Carrera, please wait." Agara, still transformed into a sword, spoke to her. Carrera and Agera were now almost as one, connected by thought communication, of course, so it was possible for them to talk to each other through their minds. So, in a field of consciousness stretched 1,000,000 times over by Carrera's ability, their conversation began. "What is it, Agara? I'm busy right now, you know. Get in my way, and I'll kill you too." "Calm down, Lady Carrera. Losing your cool is exactly what Kondo wants from you." "I know that, but he made me out to be a fool, you know. Me, an overlord? How could I ever forgive that?" Agara's chief role lately had been to stop Carrera before she got carried away, but he had never seen her this angry before. He hadn't, but if he didn't take measures right now, Carrera's defeat was inevitable. So, as earnestly as he could, he tried to persuade her. "Listen to me. Kondo hadn't been relying on his sword since the beginning, and not because he thought little of you either." "Why is that? Why is that?" "He's clearly belittling me." "No, he is not. In fact, it is quite the opposite." He recognizes you as a threat, Lady Carrera, and that's why he is trying to conceal his hand. Not everyone is born innately strong like you, do you understand me? And it is a natural thing for any warrior to consider all due measures against a strong enemy. So, what are you saying? He recognizes me as a strong fighter, then? Yes, exactly. Agara made the strongest argument he could. Kondo had fully mastered a complete style, making it his own, but he had still basically inherited Agera's style. He was serious about his craft, no doubt, but that was why he didn't break it out from the beginning, only choosing to do so now. The slight opening he revealed when firing his gun must have been caused by his nerve-wracking training. The only reason he went with that move now was that he decided Carrera was formidable enough to take the risk against. He never would have tried anything so tricky otherwise. I see. You have a good point, yes." After careful persuasion, Carrera finally saw things Agera's way. He breathed a sigh of relief. "I'm sorry to worry you, Agara. I feel like my eyes have been opened." "I am glad to hear that. Here, let me promise you that I won't make you worry any longer." "All right." With that declaration, Carrera turned toward Kondo again. Then, out of nowhere, she struck herself in the face with the back of her fist. It was a full power blast, one that seemed to make her head explode, but unperturbed, she flashed Kondo a smile. "Oops. Did I startle you?" "Well, don't worry. I wasn't being very cool-headed about any of this. I mistakenly thought that you were looking down on me. But you humans really are amazing, aren't you? You really will play all kinds of tricks to win. The idea never occurred to us, so it's kind of surprising." She was all smiles about it, but now she realized how important it was not to underestimate your enemy. She was by no means letting her guard down, but without Agira, she would have been taken in by Kondo's scheme just now. She used to allow herself to be endlessly selfish, but that past was over. She was now a loyal servant of the demon Lord Rimuru, and so she acted in accordance with her orders. Defeat was one thing, but death would be unforgivable. Carrera admonished herself. That's what that blow was for. That, and it was a way to state her resolve. Carrera recognized Kondo as an adversary, one of the same rank as her. It was a very sober thought, quite unlike her typical capricious self. Like, no way, you know? No way I would ever go all out against a human, you know? Knowing she was the strongest of all races made her conceited enough that she never really gave her all before. She thought that Kondo was going easy on her, and it required Agira's intervention to put an end to that. It was a blunder, and now that she realized it, she finally got serious. She flashed her horrible smile, one that looked boundlessly beautiful to Kondo. So, the demon's treating this seriously now? A rather unwelcome turn of events for a hapless human such as I. For the first time in this encounter, his expression changed. He now saw Carrera as a worthy enemy. Very well. I, too, will take this seriously. With that declaration, Kondo put on his armor for the first time. It wasn't a uniform manifested by the power of his will, but a spiritual outfit of pure white, a god-class piece given to him by Ludora. It was modeled after the ceremonial uniform of the old Imperial Japanese Navy, and while it didn't make Kondo look all that different, the aura he presented seemed like something else entirely. To Kondo, this uniform was also the garment he would have been buried in. As a lieutenant, he vowed to carry the guilt of all the men he had let die. He wanted to hold that resolve close to his heart, and so he decided to fight in this. Looking at him, Carrera released the full extent of her magical force and reintroduced herself. I am Carrera, menace, lord, and faithful servant of the demon lord Surimuru. By my pride, I swear I will kill you. I am Tatsuya Kondo, former lieutenant of the Imperial Japanese Navy and current commander of the Imperial Guardians, and I hereby accept your challenge. The two warriors stared each other down, quietly building up their power. Now the real battle would begin. Carrera picked up the fallen left arm, lightly putting it against her stump. That alone was all it took to reattach it like nothing had happened. A little unfair. Oh, don't be that way. Sir Rimuru gave me this precious body. I can't afford to leave even a scratch on it. The conversation was light at the moment, but both sides were looking for an opening. Kondo had his reasons for letting Carrera heal her arm. Now that he had given up his sidearm, he'd be fighting exclusively with his sword, the default form for the Oboro school. On the other hand, it meant he had no other secret trick left to pull out. He was deadly serious about this, putting everything he had on the line, and now that he held his sword in both hands, he was confident that no enemy could defeat him. Kondo's unique skill decipherer allowed him to fully grasp Carrera's movements. Every twitch of her muscles, the flow of magic force throughout her body, even the telltale signs that a spell was about to be invoked. This was linked to the ultimate skill, Sandalphon, and its performance went far beyond the realm of a unique skill. That was why he didn't miss the fact that Carrera's power was growing at an alarming rate. It was a true torrent of force, all but symbolizing the demon's sheer tyranny. And yet there was no stagnation at all to the flow. It all moved as one, as if unified by some great will. This mighty deluge would normally have resulted in a powerful explosion, but Carrera had it fully under control. What a monster, Kondo thought. Not even a trace of the grievous arm wound he landed a moment ago remained. Even her clothes were repaired, in what seemed to be a cruel joke. All this raging energy was concentrated on the demonic blade Agira had transformed into. Being united in mind and body with Carrera completed the cycle. Kondo could barely abide by this, but now he noticed a sign that troubled him even more. Astoundingly, in the very center of Carrera's magic, A fearsome crystal of power was about to be born. Kondo had an idea of what it was. He himself had one, so he knew. It was something seen when a living mind was materialized. I knew it. She's trying to obtain an ultimate skill. The moment he realized it, Kondo went on the move. He needed to eliminate this enemy at once, no matter how powerful she was. That was why he put on his ceremonial uniform, a symbol of his dedication. There was no room for defeat. He must win, by fair means or foul, and only through victory would right and wrong be decided. Kondo continued to inspect Carrera as he finished his preparations. His sword was all he had left. Pushing all his power into it, he slashed at the demon. Good, good! That unwavering eye of yours, it sends me into ecstasy. Kondo continued to swing, not lending an ear to Carrera's squeals of joy. His swings were parried by her demon blade, but the power of Kondo's military sword was nonetheless massive. Without Agera's will housed within, it might have broken her weapon right there. It was a honed, heavy slash, one that made Carrera grunt out loud. The secret to this military sword's force lay in the will placed inside of it. Kondo's ultimate skill, Sandalphone, worked on more than just bullets. His will, his soul, was in this sword, and only then was the true essence of his power revealed. That was Kondo's true secret move, and when he had to fight for keeps, that's how he did it. So Kondo's onslaught began, immediately putting Carrera on the defensive. He was determined to end this bout before Carrera could awaken to her ultimate power, using every trick in the book to push her into the corner. Even when she manipulated her sheer violence to fire off an attack of ponderous force, Kondo deflected it all without so much as blinking. Kondo clearly had the advantage in fighting technique. The only reason why this match kept going was because of Carrera's huge Magicule count, not to mention the skills of Agera on top of that. Without both, Carrera would have been annihilated long ago. Even now, a slash imbued with the power of an eraser bullet cut through Carrera's left side. She had taken many of these slashes to her limbs already, but since they had a necrosis effect applied to them, they were wreaking havoc on her magic vessel. Even her link with Agera was now being affected. Carrera bared her teeth as she stared at Kondo. It was a bad idea. However strong he was, she thought she could handle him if she put her mind to it, but Kondo wouldn't be that easy on her. Even with Agera's aid, he was superhuman, more than enough so to outclass Carrera. This damned human. Awakened to saint or not, how can a mere human corner me like this? Despite her disappointment in herself, Carrera put her right hand on her left side, which was cut open and leaking magic force. She tried to heal it, but her magic vessels were too out of control for it to work well. Normally, a wound of this level could be repaired without conscious effort, but even when she actively tried to heal, it was still like this. No matter how bold and careless Carrera could be, she was fully aware that this was an awful state of affairs. As Kondo knew, the strength of one's will can also affect how superior their power is. Kondo was a man who had attained an ultimate power entirely on his own. Compared to Carrera, who had an unlimited lifespan and lived her days however she wanted, the nobility of his character was without question. With the pain that was torturing her even now, Carrera understood the difference. A skill is meaningless if it is just given to you. Only when you wish to acquire it can you make the most of its essence. Carrera was superior to Agera in all respects. Species, physical prowess, vitality, everything. Thanks to Agera's aid, she was equal with her opponent, but she couldn't win. In fact, they were on the verge of defeat. If this keeps up, will we lose? Will I be destroyed, killed? Me, one of the overlords of the all-powerful demons? It was absolutely unacceptable. Carrera's pride would never allow it, and more than anything else, it'd be against the orders of Rimuru, her beloved demon lord. If it ever happened, she feared, it'd be such a blunder that he might kill her 1,000,000 times and still not feel sated. She might have been fearless in all other ways, but not being able to follow Rimuru's orders terrified her. I could never allow it. As soon as she shouted that, Carrera's bloodshot eyes ogled Kondo. Forcefully regenerating her body to heal the wound, she readied herself. Deeper and stronger than ever, she made a wish to beat the man before her. Until now, she had only been fighting with her all-dominant demon force. But it wasn't enough. Those who dwelt in the ranks of the ultimate were untouchable to her, as true for Diablo as it was for Kondo. She knew now that anyone who awakened an ultimate power was impossible for her to defeat, and if they were, she was no match at all for Guy Crimson, who stood at the very pinnacle of the world. Simply boosting her power wasn't enough. No matter how hard she struggled, she'd only be cannon fodder for the more powerful. Now that she was fully cornered, it finally dawned on Carrera. If she wanted to fight the truly powerful, she needed to understand herself more deeply, and what she needed the most for that was a strong will. And that was the moment when Carrera, a spiritual life form, sought the power of will, the very essence of it all. In that case, let me help you a little. She thought she heard a voice, and the next moment Carrera felt something that had been nagging her in the back of her mind take shape. She turned her attention to it, this manifestation of her wish, her determination. Until now, it was just pure power raging inside of her, something she controlled and tapped into as necessary. Now, however, it was time to recognize that power as her own and release it. But any ultimate power needs a name. My power, let me give you a name. You will become my skill and further release your force in order to fulfill the role Sir Rimuru gave me. Your name is the ultimate skill Abaddon, Lord of Destruction. Abaddon, the Destroyer, the one who destroys, and the King of the Abyss. For the Menace Lord, no power could have been more appropriate. Now she finally had it. The absolute, undeniable power to destroy everything. The ultimate skill, Abaddon, Lord of Destruction. It was the embodiment of all Carrera's desires. A fearsome power that, once released, would bring certain destruction to its opponents. It took encountering a truly powerful enemy for Carrera to desire power for the first time, and now that encounter was about to come to an end. This isn't funny, Kondo thought. Just when he was about to finish her off, Carrera had awakened to her ultimate power right before his eyes. He wished he could tell her to stop with that nonsense, but it was too late now. He had tried to deliver a fatal blow to her on several occasions, but no matter how many times Carrera fell, she kept getting back up. He used a removal bullet to slash through her barriers, then a necrosis bullet to disrupt the magical flow within her. Then, once she had accumulated enough damage, the power of the eraser bullet ability took center stage. This should have been settled long ago. And yet, despite all his earnestness, Kondo was unable to defeat Carrera, and now her power was awakened. It was, as he was keenly aware, a terrible mistake. Well, wonderful! If only I had any judgment bullets left. Perhaps it was Kondo's nascent timidity that made the thought come to his mind. A judgment bullet was a true joker card, something he could only produce once per day, the strongest blow he could muster. But he had used one not that long ago to bring Veldora to his knees. Begging for something he didn't have in a life-or-death battle was the height of foolishness, something very unlike Kondo. Here she was, this formidable foe before her who had just gained an unknown power. The mere thought put him in a somber mood, but he could still rally himself. Now that he had his ceremonial uniform on, it was his duty to fight through the battle, never wavering in his resolve. But as he took up that duty, he spoke to Carrera, revealing his personal feelings for the first time. "You are all so unfair." She laughed at mankind as feeble, and rightly so. In terms of species, the difference in status was like a chasm, impossible to fill. Even Kondo felt justified in complaining about it a bit. Carrera gave this a satisfied nod. Yes, of course it is. We are the strongest species after all. But I think you're being rather unfair too, aren't you? It was the greatest compliment Carrera could give, in her own way. She had already recognized him as her equal, and thus, with the utmost respect, she was ready to challenge him full bore. Pointing her sword at him, she assumed a fighting stance, making sure her guard was up. Abaddon, Lord of Destruction, activated itself in both of her hands, a massive force circulating through them. The space between her and Kondo was filled with black and white light as a huge amount of magicules transformed into energy, the shock waves alone threatening to blow them away. Carrera could control it all through conscious focus alone. Allow me to show you everything. I'd appreciate it if you didn't. Don't be such a stick in the mud. I have recognized you as my equal, and I will show you the best magic I've got. Kondo had a bad feeling about this, but Carrera was a demon who cared very little about the feelings of other people. That gave the demon Lord Leon a hard time as well, although Carrera was just playing around at the time. It was a nasty thing to think, but from Kondo's point of view, Leon had it easy. He didn't have to deal with Carrera when she was truly serious, but Kondo did. Among the 4 devil lords, including Diablo, Carrera now boasted the largest magicule count. She hadn't been able to fully control it before, but with Abaddon, that shortcoming was a thing of the past. The current Carrera, in fact, could manipulate magic to an extent that rivaled Velgrin. Let me grant you perdition. Vanish before me. Abyss annihilation. This was an ultimate magic, surpassing even gravity collapse. The greatest and most powerful attack magic, and Carrera's ideals in action. It worked by adding matter from the lowest of hellish abysses into a collapsed gravitational force field, generating an unfathomable torrent of extreme energy. It was, needless to say, extremely difficult to even point this energy at something, much less control it. It wasn't even meant to be invoked while standing on a planetary surface, but Carrera didn't hesitate to whip it out. One mistake controlling it could wipe out an entire planet, in fact. She had never successfully pulled it off during her practice sessions in the underworld, and this was the first time she ever tried it in the material world. It had never worked before, but she still didn't hesitate. If the other demonesses were here, they would have stopped her at any cost. But Carrera wasn't about to be held down now. Agora was there, but telling Carrera to quit now would have been far too much to ask. If anything, the most frightened person in the arena was Agora, not Kondo, because he knew exactly how dangerous this magic was. Kondo, meanwhile, detected the danger once Carrera began to invoke the skill, deploying Sandalphon before she made her final declaration. That quick assessment was Kondo's forte, but this time he had messed with the wrong opponent. Abyss Annihilation was an extremely large spell, one that could only work using Carrera's absurd magic force, and its range was just as gigantic. If this weren't another dimension, there was no telling how much damage it would cause. Kondo wondered if it could even destroy this entire dimension. If so, and if it was aimed at him like it was now, anything in the line of fire would be obliterated. That was Kondo's conclusion. And if this dimension was destroyed, it could even harm Emperor Ludora. His defenses were sound enough, yes, but this was an unprecedented attack. And that wasn't all. Now Kondo became aware of an even more troubling fact. Looking at Carrera's posture, even this vicious magic was just a decoy. Should he somehow survive this, he would likely then be struck by her real ace in the hole, a downward slash from her demon blade. If so, there was no way to counter it. The only way to survive was to brave every sacrifice and outslash the enemy. So Kondo made up his mind. Sheathing his beloved sword, he waited for the moment to come. Then, as soon as Carrera activated her magic, he made his move. Risking it all, he drew his sword. Multi-layered blossom flash. And then, right there, he reproduced the technique that Hakuro had shown him. The power imbued into it was that of a judgment bullet, one he was only allowed to use once per day. But he had to exceed the limit here, or else only destruction awaited. So he gambled on his own potential, firmly believing he could do it. The power of the soul shone brightly in the arena. Did it belong to Kondo or to Carrera? That would remain forever unknown. But one thing was clear. Both sides were giving everything they had. Kondo's blade slashed through the torrent of frantic energy generated by abyss annihilation. It made Carrera's eyes widen, but there was a smile on her lips. Intense pain racked his body. Even this god-class ceremonial robe, the best protection he could hope for, was unable to resist the power of destruction. But he didn't let this intimidate him. His faith unwavering, he aimed at Carrera's head and unleashed the 8 blossom slashes that gave Hakuro's move its name. Carrera went above him. Nice try. Now let me show you my greatest technique, for I have made Agira's experience my own. It was both spoken and not spoken. In a single moment of time, Carrera had communicated her will to Kondo in the form of 100 sword flashes, all transcending his speed. This was the move Crestwater 100 Flower Bloom, and its unbearable violence promptly shattered Kondo's sword. And immediately after, Carrera's final blow made a diagonal slash across his body. Kondo could feel the strength draining from his entire body. He had exceeded his limits long ago, and knowing this, he closed his eyes and fell on his back. The end of his life was near. How incomplete! He laughed at himself as he thought this. In the end, he could do nothing, neither protect his nation nor keep his promise to Ludora. Be my friend, Tatsuya. I couldn't even keep my promise to you. Kondo's heart was filled with regret, the thought of the unfulfilled promise making him feel ready to burst. Tatsuya, may I ask you a favor? Yes. Anything. Anything. I will do whatever I can to help as a friend. Right. I wanted to return the favor. I wanted to thank Ludora for calling me a friend, for giving me a reason to live in this world. But even so, that wish was such a cruel one. Long ago, I asked Damrada for a favor. I told him that, should I ever lose sight of my ideals, I wanted him, my friend, to stop me. But I have now lived far too long, and Damrada is too kind a person to take my life with his own hand. I truly regret asking him for such a terrible favor. So, Tatsuya, I know you will be able to reason through it calmly. You will be able to kill me, won't you? So please, you must interfere with Damrada's efforts and stop me with your own hand. He didn't want to. He wanted Ludora to live as much as anyone. He was an intelligent man, reasonable and always keeping his eyes on the prize. He was like an idol to Kondo, a lord he could always strive to emulate but never equal. He was the one who stopped Kondo before he could turn the blade upon himself, despondent after failing to protect his home country. Emperor Ludora, the great hero, but he still nodded, for he knew of Ludora's suffering. His body, his shining soul, had long since reached its limit. He had reincarnated himself many, many times in his quest to control his special skill, Michael, Lord of Justice. Thanks to Decipherer, his own unique skill, Kondo felt he understood that better than anyone else. Even more than Velgrind, in all likelihood. Velgrind had grown blinded by her love for Ludora. So much so that if she knew the favors he asked Damrada and Kondo for, she'd likely be furious. In a sense, it was only natural that Ludora would ask this favor of Kondo. He had nodded at his emperor, and so he had to keep the promise. That's what making a promise meant, after all. But that time was far away. Ludora was still alive and well, in full control of his faculties. Or was that really the case? Looking back, there were a few irregularities he could have picked up on. The cold eyes he'd reveal at times, the occasionally heartless decisions he'd hand down. That was the only Ludora Condor knew, but he could understand how it must have tormented Damrada. If Ludora was alive, he thought, why should Damrada be so distressed about it? Looking back, it was a pretty silly thought to have. When did it begin? When did Damrada begin to make serious moves toward this effort? Did I overlook something important, perhaps? He had interfered with Damrada as ordered, but perhaps that was a serious mistake. When they first met, Ludora was absolutely a shining presence, but Kondo had missed his transformation. As soon as Kondo realized this, he felt the gloom in his heart clear out, as if the shackles had finally been undone. Yeah, I suppose I was long ago under Michael's influence as well. How pathetic, he thought. And it was. Right when Damrada was about to murder Ludora, he should have acted first instead of interfering. Perhaps he would have been able to stop Ludora then. What a mistake. There was no taking that back now. Kondo didn't know why he had been freed from Michael's control, but at this point he could no longer move a finger. All that remained was to wait for his body to rot away. My liege, I'm useless. I couldn't bear your suffering alongside you, nor could I do anything to alleviate it. And even that promised to free you. His role was to stop Ludora, but there was no carrying that out now. His life would surely end in regret. Hey, why are you sleeping down there? Let's keep going. He heard a voice speaking to him, rousing him from his sleep. Opening his eyes a little, he saw his enemy, the one who fought him to the death, pouting and looking straight at him. She was a demon with shining blonde hair and a dazzling smile, truly beautiful. Don't be ridiculous. I'm already near death. There is no way I could fight. But we haven't settled this yet. You can't do that. Settle this. Yes, indeed. In the end, you are so unfair. He doubted it was coming across, but Kondo still smiled faintly at Carrera's word. Carrera herself would already be out of energy, just a few steps away from losing her physical body, and the thought made him smile. He tried to lift his body up and failed. It was so shameful. So I can't do anything after all. And meanwhile, the demon before him was so free, so pure. I truly do envy you. It was an honest, sincere thought. It drove Kondo to say things he didn't even understand the meaning of. I have a favor. Use my gun to kill His Majesty. He was about to entrust his one and only role to his mortal enemy. What am I doing? What a stupid thing to ask the demon I was just fighting against. The wishes of the defeated were doomed to always be laughed at. He truly thought so, but for some reason he still said it. So Carrera picked up the Nambu semi-automatic on the ground. You mean this? It's broken. Ah, yes, it probably is, Kondo thought as his consciousness faded. Perhaps asking for this wish was a little Na'vi of him. No demon would be that kind to him. That's the harsh reality of it, and Kondo knew it well. He was fading fast. He had become a saint, but he was still a human being. If his soul was broken, revival would be impossible. Carrera's blow had inflicted a fatal wound on him, and he could tell he was disintegrating from the far edges inward. By now, reversal was impossible. So you're going to give up just because you broke your toy here? After all the suffering you put me through, that's pretty weak. It was such a nice battle, too. What a disappointment. Carrera, his former enemy, was giving him encouragement. He didn't expect that. So, with his last ounce of energy, he smiled bitterly. Hey, yeah, hilarious. My own worthlessness is but a joke. With that, he tried to let go of his consciousness. But, wait, don't go on me yet. Maybe willing to kill this emperor for you, huh? Um, oh, You're so slow on the uptake. What do I get out of it? Everybody knows that if you want a demon to work for you, you need an agreement. Carrera, by her nature, was not at all the type of demon you could negotiate with. But for some reason, she felt like doing Kondo a favor. That didn't mean she'd do it for free, though. Kondo couldn't help but smile at the flustered Carrera. It was growing more amusing by the moment. This devil, his enemy, acting all shy and confused. It was soothing. You will get everything I have, even my soul. So please. The words were no longer audible. Kondo opened his eyes with the last of his strength and gave Carrera an iron-willed look. Believing in a demon was beyond laughable. But her beauty burned into his mind. He made a wish. Perhaps it was his own selfish delusions telling him that she'd get the message. But even so, he placed his final hopes on it, if only to save himself from eternal disappointment. But the voiceless request reached Carrera. Your wish has been heard. By my name, as Carrera, the Menace, Lord, our contract is complete. Your wish shall be granted. Kondo smiled at these solemn words. Moving his powerless hand toward Carrera by sheer force of will, his fingertips touched the gun that she had assured him was broken. The moment his finger touched it, the Nambu semi-automatic glowed a golden shade. His power had transformed it, and it was reborn as a god-class weapon, and through it, Kondo's soul passed over to Carrera. But it did not include his heart core. Carrera expected this. The heart core of someone who had attained enlightenment and absolved himself of all sin could never be reborn, even if bound down. It was released from the wheel of reincarnation for good, with no restrictions placed upon it, and then it would travel to the promised land. Liberation. It made Carrera a little sad. Puffed. This isn't funny. It's been a long time since I had an opponent with some actual backbone. And as she muttered that, in that case, let's merge the ultimate skill Abaddon, Lord of Destruction, with Sandalphon, Lord of Judgment. She felt like she heard a voice. Hurriedly, Carrera turned her attention back to the gun in her hand. Its golden glow seemed to brighten further, as if to tell her she'd no longer be alone. It was something to remember Kondo by, and now it was Carrera's new partner. Oh, so you're with me now. When she spoke, the light from the gun seemed to blink for a moment, and as it did, she began to feel the power flowing into her. The way you use your power is far too careless. I will help you, so you must make sure to use me better than that. It sounded like Kondo's voice to her, and the next moment she understood everything. In an instant, she had made Kondo's ability her own. How is that any of your business? Stop treating me like a child. Arrogant to the end, Carrera thought. But at least she didn't feel lonely any longer. She stood up. Congratulations on your splendid victory. I, Agira, am thoroughly impressed. You too. Good job surviving that and all. Hey, it's very embarrassing to receive praise from you, you know. Agira, despite being wounded up and down his body, was still smiling. He had taken the brunt of Kondo's sword skills, all while taking in the full fury of Carrera's magic. It had brought him almost to the breaking point, but now that he was no longer in sword form, that all fed back to him in the form of serious injury. It was a wonder that he was still manifesting himself here, but still he looked tremendously satisfied with himself. This man, Kondo, he was a descendant of one of your trainees, wasn't he? It would appear so. Guess I shouldn't treat all humans like idiots, given the way they can inherit and accumulate skills and everything. Agira happily nodded, but seeing how much stronger he was than you was a surprise. The smile disappeared. He was but only because he was a truly exceptional man. If we had fought with swords alone, I am positive I would have won. Yeah, right. They shared a loud laugh. If they were alike in any way, It was that they were both sore losers. But beyond the eyes of the laughing Carrera was a rift in this dimension, which was already collapsing. Through it, she could see Emperor Ludora sitting on his throne. "Let's go. This fight's just getting started." Carrera strode on, her usual bold smile now front and center on her face once more. "Of course. I will be glad to join you, and we shall strike terror in the hearts of those who dare to stand in our way." Agara followed, wounded almost to the point of death, but totally unconcerned about it. The enemy was still out there, and the most important thing now was the promise they must fulfill. Granite, the third-ranked member of the Single Digits, was a hero who supported the Empire from time immemorial. He helped lay the foundation of the Empire, playing an instrumental role in the 1,000 years of peace it enjoyed. Glorified as a god of war by its subjects, he was a great man, one chronicled in history books. Although he had disappeared from the public eye in the years since, he was still alive and well, serving as the Emperor's close confidant and captain of the 4 knights who guarded him. A skilled warrior versed in all manner of weapons and fighting techniques, his physique was magnificent. Despite being over 2,000 years old, his black hair, slicked back and kept short, gave him an eternally youthful impression. He was now facing off against Benimaru, the Flare Lord. Both men squared off against each other in the center of the arena. "I am Granite, Guardian of the Empire, Benimaru. Consider me the second in command of the Demon Lord Rimuru." And after those introductions, all that remained was to fight. That was Benimaru's thought, but Granite just smiled at him. "Now, wait one moment. Are you willing to hear me out?" "That depends on what it is." "It's simple. We've been doing some research on you, you see. I've been told that you're a very, very strong man. I'm flattered." I wasn't trying to flatter you. I've slaughtered many powerful people, so I have a good eye for these things. In my opinion, you have fully passed the test. Not even your garden variety demon lord could give you much trouble. What are you getting at? At this point, Benimaru was starting to get irritated. He didn't mind negotiation, but now that the battle had grown this heated, there was no time for casual conversation. If he was going to surrender, that was a different story, but the way Granite looked, that wasn't the case. If anything, he seemed to be steering this talk toward demanding Benimaru's surrender. That prediction was right on the money. "I didn't expect you to be this strong, you see. It's quite a surprise, and I have to say, Kondo disappointed me. Thanks to the negligence of his Imperial Intelligence Bureau, the entire empire is exposed to danger. If the damage is worse than expected, it will be too late to stage a final battle. Personally, I think it's time to call it a day. Will you swear to join my side and serve under me? If you do, I promise I will take full responsibility for both you and all who serve you." It was a very convenient offer for Granite. Here he was facing sure defeat, and instead he was offering a ceasefire with 0 consequences for himself. From a third-party view, that's all it would have looked like. But it wasn't that, for Granite didn't think he could lose. He was only trying to bring Benimaru and the others to shore up the significant loss of strength the Empire faced. And Benimaru, seeing through this, was now feeling extraordinarily annoyed. This fool trying to use us as his pawns? But he does seem to have the power to back up that confidence. Benimaru calmly assessed Granite. The fact that he was making this suggestion here, in the alternate dimension, indicated that he knew what was going on in the other gates. He was more than a guard, likely more of an officer type with a tactical view over the entire battle. Putting my army aside for a moment, "What would you do with Sir Rimuru?" "I am sorry to say that the Demon Lord is dangerous. In order to confirm your allegiance to me, I'd need to ask your help defeating him." That was about what Benimaru figured. This was the offer he made, but what he really wanted was for the monsters to slaughter each other. And yes, Maybe Granite would take Benimaru in if he survived, but he wasn't stupid enough to trust such an uncertain story as that. Besides, betraying Rimuru was too outrageous an idea to even suggest. How ridiculous! We would never stab Sir Rimuru in the back. Benimaru was listening to all of this in order to stall for time. He had, in fact, heard a little voice in his mind a bit earlier, a vaguely familiar, comforting one, and it had a suggestion for him. Benimaru, may I make a slight modification to the type of power you crave? It was a pretty shady thing to ask, and normally Benimaru would have never given it the nod. But for some reason, he agreed to it. He had evolved into a flame soul ogre, a spiritual life form, but he wasn't satisfied with just that. He'd been lent an ultimate skill from Rimuru, and based on that experience, he wanted to acquire one by his own hand. And he was actually halfway there already. Watching the battle between Rimuru and Velgrind, as well as the struggles of his other companions, Benimaru had become enlightened. His power of fire, his main specialty, was now integrated with his unique skill-born leader. He couldn't reproduce Rimuru's absolute severance ability, but his beloved sword Gurren had been reforged by Kurobe to attain Godclaw. When Dark Flame was added to it, the difference in performance was such that he'd never lose with it. Between his unique talents as a flame soul ogre and the skill-born leader that united them all, he was on the verge of reaching his ultimate peak. That's when the voice came in. So he decided to wait and see what kind of changes his approval brought about. That was why he agreed to talk with Granite. But when he asked him to betray Rimuru, Benimaru began to regret it deeply. The mere suggestion was offensive to him. Having had more than enough of this, he drew his sword and pointed it toward Granite. Whoa. It's not good to have a short fuse like that. Monsters are all about survival of the fittest, aren't they? Aren't you supposed to serve and follow the strong? And don't monsters switch masters all the time? Hearing this from Granite almost made Benimaru's blood boil. He was the commander-in-chief of the monster forces, and he thought he had a good grip on his anger by now, but I guess I can't laugh at Shion any longer. He mocked himself for it, but now he had no intention of holding back his anger. Draw your blade. There is no meaning to further conversation. Oh, brother, Granite said, shaking his head. I don't understand. This is both an extension of mercy and the greatest concession you could ever receive from me. Out of great respect for your position, I was allowing you to serve under me without anyone having to be hurt. He sounded truly mystified over it. He certainly didn't doubt his own strength. He was saying all this because he truly believed he could overwhelm his foe. And Benimaru, fully aware of this, grew more incensed by the moment. The only reason he hadn't started slashing away yet was because he wanted to make Granite truly regret his word. So are you keeping this chat going because you want to make excuses about your defeat? What a thing to say. I like your spirit, but you should really know your place here. Yeah, my men were perhaps too proud for their own good, and all of them are now defeated. It would shame me to even show my face to His Majesty right now, but if you would only nod your head at me, we'd have more strength than ever before. I'd be happy, and even better, you wouldn't have to die. We can build a good relationship that way, can't you see? And now that I've given you my offer, do you understand what's at stake here? I'm not at all the sort to use you and your people as discardable pawns, you see. Despite how obvious Benimaru's annoyance was by now, Granite just kept pressing on. And even worse, he was unmistakably sincere in his words. He had the air of a hero, certainly, and his demeanor spoke volumes about his honest, guileless approach. If you too are a commander, think about it. Think of all the soldiers and officers you could save with a single decision. And let me also tell you the cold, hard truth. Damrada and Kondo truly are strong. I have been friends with Damrada for many years, and I know his character well. I'm stronger, of course, but not even a primal could defeat the likes of him. And look at Kondo, a relative newcomer, but every bit as strong as we are. His Majesty placed him under his control because he's too dangerous, really, but there's no way a primal could beat him either. What I'm saying here is that if you seek to confront His Majesty, you will have to face 4 invincible guardians first, including myself and Velgrit. And you can understand how impossible that is, don't you? This guy's got a pretty loose tongue, Benimaru thought. That diffused his anger a little, so he decided to see what else he could milk him for. There were a few words here and there that enraged him, but if Granite could reveal more of the Empire's inner workings to him, he wouldn't mind putting up with it. One interesting tidbit in particular was how the Emperor had Kondo under his control. It seemed clear now that Ledora had some kind of domination skill. Of all the irresponsible things to say to me, it's a little surprising to hear you decide for us that we can't win. Besides, even if I said yes, I have no interest in having our hearts and minds all be controlled by you. Have I piqued your interest? Well, I'm sure I have. I understand that you ogres have long served as talented mercenaries, so I assumed you might be interested in joining me under the right conditions. And fear not. As you said, His Majesty can indeed control people's minds. But there's hardly any point worrying about it, is there? Unconvinced. Well, you may be entitled to, but it's something of a thorny issue, you know. If you are ruled over after all, you should be proud of it. If you weren't competent enough for that honor, after all, we'd just be ignoring you anyway. Kondo is ruled over in the same way too, although he's not aware of it. I'm the only one who knows about it all. Can't help but feel a little sorry for him sometimes. This is going nowhere. It really was out of the question. He could understand Granite's logic, faulty as it was. If you were being mind-controlled but never realized it, there was nothing to be unhappy about, was the idea. It was valid, yes, but not exactly a convincing argument. You don't think? But it's really true. You have nothing to worry about. I was taking an alternate angle to this because I thought you wouldn't believe me otherwise, but I can assure you that you and your companions will never be ruled over in that fashion. Why not? Because you are weak. This reignited Benimaru's anger. Granite's speech was perfectly natural. He didn't suggest for a moment that he was bluffing, or for that matter, meaning to insult him. He was just breezily declaring that Benimaru and his team were weak, a natural fact in his mind. Benimaru, fully aware that he had evolved into something stronger, never expected this sort of disrespect. Well, hear me out. What I mean is that as enemies of ours, you're on the strong side, certainly, but if you join us, you wouldn't be worth having your minds dominated. It looks like both Kondo and Yuuki are under His Majesty's control now, but now he's taken over the mind of Sir Veldora as well. I doubt he has enough remaining force to add all of you to the list, so if you swear loyalty to him, I'm sure he'll allow you to move freely. After all, even if all of you challenged me at once, you still wouldn't be able to beat me. You certainly aren't lacking in confidence. But I'm just as confident in my own strength, you know. And I'm getting kind of sick of hearing all your nonsense. So how about we see which side is correct via actions, not words? Benimaru readjusted the sword on his shoulder. He thought he could get some more useful information, but concluded that any more of this would just make him more agitated. Granite gave this a displeasured sigh. You monsters are so hard to deal with, you know. I'm extending a hand to you, and you're just pushing it away. It's sad that you can't see the reality of this, but, oh, well, I'll give on trying to win you over then. Perhaps I could negotiate with whoever just defeated Minaza. Benimaru snickered. Better not. Shion's more hard-headed than I am. This made Granite's countenance grow stern for the first time in this whole encounter. Oh, I don't believe I mentioned Minaza to you. Do you know who she is? Well, intelligence gathering is a key part of any war zone, isn't it? Sir Imuru taught me to be thorough about that sort of thing. Interesting. But how did you get that information inside Lady Velgrin's dimension here? It really would be a shame to kill a man of your stature. Saying this, Granite finally drew his sword. He had a skilled hand for any weapon, but always felt better with a familiar sword in his hand. The moment he held it up to Benimaru, his mood changed completely. His previously calm demeanor vanished entirely, and he radiated an air of supremacy that'd give even a god-ogre a run for their money. His short hair stood up on end, as if personifying the expression hair-raising havoc. Ask not the sparrow how the eagle soars. An expression from an old history book from another world, if I recall correctly. It means that the little people cannot understand the thoughts of the greats, and that describes you to a T. You should have obeyed me while I was being gentler in my advice. You're still lecturing me? Because I've had quite enough of it. Then die, army destroyer, quaking blast. From the very first move, Granite was unleashing his maximum power, fully convinced that would be the end of it. He was gifted in enemy analysis, capable of discerning the combatability of his opponents via red enemy status, a skill granted to him by Ludora via alternate. That gave him a correct grasp of the power of Benimaru and his team, and that was why he was convinced there was no way he could be defeated. Read enemy status wasn't foolproof, of course. If the target had awakened to an ultimate skill, it'd be impossible to gauge their full power. Still, it was easy enough to guess the level of power involved simply by gauging magicule counts, and in that respect, Benimaru didn't look like a threat. Neither, for that matter, did Sue, Shion, or the demons. It was clear to Granite that not one of them could have acquired an ultimate skill. The primals were a thorn in their side. Negotiating with them was a fool's errand. He planned to do away with the demons if they had come through this gate, but instead he got Benimaru. In this, Granite saw great promise, an enterprising monster on the verge of discovering his ultimate skill. But as he stood, he was no match for himself. He had a huge amount of magicules, but still less than half of Granite's. In that way, it was natural for him to decide Benimaru was no threat, and Granite wasn't being conceited or careless at all. If the enemy held an ultimate skill that might give him a hard time, depending on the nature of it, an extended fight could lead to his enemy feeling like his life was in danger, which could trigger an awakening. But a mere conversation wasn't going to do that. So Granite was determined to finish Benimaru off with such overwhelming force that he wouldn't be able to counter with anything. He knew Benimaru didn't have any hidden transformation skill like the lycanthropes, and now that he did, there was absolutely no chance of losing. Granite's victory was a certainty. What a travesty. After all that bravado, you're not showing me much. What? Then something truly unexpected happened. Army destroyer, quaking blast, a move that contained enough energy to vaporize Benimaru, was harmlessly parried off by his sword. It was a truly unbelievable sight to behold. All of Granite's equipment was god class from head to toe. Benimaru clearly wielded a good sword, but it couldn't have held up to god class gear. And, more to the point, no. This is unreal. Why have you obtained an ultimate skill? Granite's shouting was understandable. The idea of someone obtaining an ultimate skill without showing even the tiniest sign in advance was sheer lunacy. It threw him into a panic, even though Benimaru remained cool. Why are you so amazed? Aren't all of us constantly growing in life? He tried to sound all cool about it, but on the inside he was sweating it badly. He had, in fact, obtained this power at the exact moment he stepped up to stop Granite's blade. And right when he did, he got a glimpse of his full power. If his timing was even a little off just now, Benimaru would have taken terrible damage. He could have died even. It was certainly nothing to laugh about. That was a close call. I didn't think he was hiding his full abilities that much, but without this power I would have lost, huh? Good thing, he now thought, that he put up with that story for so long. Right, right. Now it's my turn. Mentally shifting gears, Benimaru focused on his enemy. He was glad to survive that in the end, but he could reflect on that later. The power he had just acquired was exactly the ideal he had envisioned, so he wasted no time breaking it out, as free and easy as if he was taking a breath. This was the ultimate skill, Amaterasu, Lord of Shimmering Flame, a fearsome force based on the information seal obtained by analyzing Velgrin. His beloved sword Gurren took on a black glow, the dark haze of heat that now symbolized his authority. This was both a literal haze and a representation of being fully impossible to hit, no substantial form, something that cannot be burned, frozen, or cut open. That, and it had one more meaning, the light of the sun, a superheated flame. To this magical flame was added Benimaru's swordsmanship, and not even he could imagine how powerful that made him. Granite, for his part, had fully lived up to his God of War nickname. Although shocked for a moment, he immediately calmed himself and began searching for his enemy's weak point. Benimaru now had far fewer magicules, a potential side effect of acquiring an ultimate skill. He remained a force that your typical demon lord would be helpless against, but his magic level was only about a third of Granite's. This unknown new force was a threat, but by his reckoning, another full-throated strike could overcome it. "Don't mess with me, monster," he shouted. "I'm not going to hold back next time. You're about to face every ounce of my might." In the Imperial Army, Granite's brute strength was second only to Velgrin's. He was stronger than Damrada even, and likely an even match with Kondo. That remained just as true now. But there was a good reason why he was entrusted with guarding Ludora. He just never had a chance to get fully serious in battle. Now he was summoning all his might to crush Benimaru. Die! Army Destroyer, Quaking Blast. It was the same technique as before, but on a far greater level. Raging spirit gushed out of him, discharging in the form of lightning bolts in the air. But they harmlessly passed through Benimaru. Nothing could catch the heat haze. There was a roaring sound. Something had happened, not in this space, but some other realm. Damn it, Carrera, of all the terrible things to do. Benimaru's mind was filled with vivid images of what Carrera had done. He didn't need to go through moss for it. After acquiring Amaterasu, Lord of Shimmering Flame, he was able to see whatever those serving him could, as long as they were connected to Rimuru via a soul corridor. It gave him a picture-perfect view of Carrera's skills. "Let me show you something real special. I've only just seen it myself, but, well, let's give it a whirl." What? Granite couldn't react. Benimaru's attack had just cut him into tiny pieces that were charred by the time they reached the ground. Perhaps Benimaru was the most terrible of all. He truly moved like a haze off a hot road. Amaterasu, derived from Velgrin's own abilities, included the skill Dominate Heat, which accelerated his body. Using that, he could release a sword slash at truly divine speed. Although it wasn't quite up to cardinal acceleration levels, it was an invincible skill, powerful and fast. It is called Crestwater Dark Flame, 100 Flower Bloom. Not that you're around to hear that, but with that side comment, Benimaru turned away, a refreshed expression on his face. Granite truly was strong, calculating, well-prepared, and in tip-top fighting condition. His defeat was caused, in so many words, by bad luck. If there was any mistake he made, it was violating the tried-and-true credo of striking the enemy while you can still defeat them. Benimaru vowed not to repeat Granite's error in his mind. Velgrind was growing concerned. She should have been watching out for the demon lord Rimuru all along. He had consumed her separate body, and now she couldn't communicate with it. Any thoughts she projected were swallowed by the abyss. doomed to never receive a response. Even pouring energy into her other body felt like nothing more than throwing it into a bottomless swamp. There was just no point to it. The true dragon bit her lip. Approximately half of her total energy was lost with no hope of recovery. Seeing her seemingly invincible parallel existence get defeated like this made it hard for her to retain her composure. Compared to her, at full health, she had only around 20% of her magicule. It was now, in her estimation, impossible to defeat Rimuru, and she was forced to conclude that fleeing the scene as soon as possible was her best choice. "Ludora, I can't put him in danger," so she decided to abandon guard duty of the gate she was behind. Fortunately for her, she guessed, nobody had come to attack her yet, so she didn't have to hesitate as she went back outside the gate. If someone got in her way, she could just take care of them then. There, in the room with the 8 gates, she did indeed see a few figures. "Oh, why are you leaving in such a hurry, Lady Velgrind? Did you forget something?" The question was asked by Testarossa, relaxing and sipping some tea like she owned the place. "Blong, blong." Testarossa's smile grew as Velgrind glared at her. Considering the hurry she was in, having to face this troublesome opponent was a great annoyance. "I asked you," Testarossa said with an elegant smile, "to stop calling me that, didn't I? Or are you trying to pick a fight with me?" Her eyes were no longer smiling. Velgrind was still superior by far to her, but she wasn't ready to take a single step back. "You want to go with me after I beat you that badly?" "I would be happy to, yes. After all, I don't really need to win. If I can buy some time against you, all is well." Testarossa stood up as she spoke. Velgrind immediately greeted her with her fist. The shockwave shattered the table and chairs, Esprit and Zonda evacuating a prudent distance away. Now she was dancing lightly on the ground. Velgrind's heat was so intense that just touching her would burn her into cinders, her speed such that you couldn't see her with the naked eye. It was an intense onslaught, and there was certainly no need to try taking that on. And it wasn't just a matter of level. Velgrind had nearly 10 times more magicules than Testarossa, even though her tank was down to about 20%. That's how much of a gap there was. And yet Testarossa looked as relaxed as ever. Winning would be difficult. There wasn't really any way to defeat her. But if she wanted to stall for time without attempting a victory, that was no problem for her. "This is why I hate you so much." "Oh, too bad, too bad. I have nothing but the utmost respect for you as Sir Veldora's elder sister. Quit being so shameless about this. Stop bothering me and get out of my way. Sorry, but I will have to decline that request. I may not look it, but I'm a very sore loser, Sue. I'm gonna get even with you right now." Testarossa truly meant it. She couldn't beat Velgrind in a head-to-head match, but merely harassing her was much easier. And even if she couldn't hold out until the other officers were on the scene, Rimuru himself was likely to show up soon. By that point, her victory was assured. So Rimuru's victory was truly a sight to behold. Overwhelming Lady Velgrind was like taking candy from a baby for him. "Now it's my turn." Rimuru had done much to reveal Velgrind's arsenal to Testarossa. She didn't want this opportunity to slip away no matter what. Red and white streaks crossed paths in the air. One was harsh and intense, the other graceful and elegant. The jewel-colored pattern weaved itself around the chamber at frightening speed, and then they faced off against each other, neither side having made any contact. "That's crazy. You're a different person from before." "I suppose I am, yes. I was rather surprised at it myself, but I too have acquired an ultimate skill." "That's the reason, I presume." Testarossa broke the news casually, as if it were nothing serious. She had actually used her waiting time to wish for a new power, and as a result she successfully materialized the very shape of her mind. She thought she heard a mysterious voice when she did, but she dismissed it as her imagination. This was all done by sheer instinct, It was just the way the demon Testarossa always worked. But what struck her curiosity was the name of the ultimate skill, Belial, Lord of the Underworld. Much like Luminous's skill, Asmodeus, ruler of lust, it held governance over life and death, but Belial was tilted more toward death, befitting Testarossa's nature. To her, defeat was a humiliation she could never admit to, and that applied just as much to the defeat of death. If a demon wanted to evolve, that required them to accumulate power to their current limit, then age at least 2,000 years. That meant even a single defeat was unforgivable. But when it came to death, defeat meant annihilation, losing one's body and being returned to hell. A draw, strictly speaking, didn't count as a defeat, but fleeing battle was a different story. A spiritual life form is easily influenced by its own mind, and if one admits that they can't beat their opponents and stop putting up resistance, that counts as a defeat. There were a few truly demented demons out there, Diablo one of them, who had maintained perfect, undefeated records, but they were few and far between. Testarossa could count them on one hand. But the only thing that really mattered was that you never had your heart broken. That was why Testarossa never stopped challenging Zegian. As long as you didn't stop until you won, it never counted as defeat. And it was the same thing here. If she didn't run away from Velgrind, Testarossa thought, she was bound to win against her someday. You've obtained an ultimate skill? Yes. Partly because I was getting sick of Diablo's boasting, but mainly I just realized how inadequate I was in our previous battle. If a skill represents what I am in my heart, I thought, then I didn't think I really needed any. But that, it seems, was rather shallow thinking. Perhaps it's because I was able to face up to my own desires. I feel like I've better honed the way I use my powers now. Considering her possession of Ragwall, Lord of Relief, Velgrin could understand what Testarossa meant. That, she knew, was why getting out of this chamber was so difficult for her. "This is so frustrating," Testarossa laughed at this muttered griping. I couldn't ask for a better compliment. Just as that remark brought Velgrin's rage up to a maximum, there was a sudden explosion, one so massive that it distorted space itself. It brought Velgrin back to her senses. She looked back, surprised. One of the gates had been blown away in spectacular fashion, and from behind it, the blonde-haired Carrera was visible. She was responsible for a lot of the things that gave Leon a bad name, by the way, but that's irrelevant right now. "Hello there. Looks like I'm right on schedule, huh? I'm not a big fan of losing all the time, too, so I'm hoping you'll let me join in." "Hee hee hee hee. Hey, don't you start, Carrera. I'm not trying to be mean or anything, but you're covered in wounds." "Well, that Condor guy was pretty strong, all right. But I'm satisfied enough for now, so all right. I'll let it slide today." Carrera laughed even as she was visibly having trouble standing up. Esprit quickly ran up to lend her a shoulder, Zonda inviting her to sit in a chair he had all set for her. Agora was there too, but nobody gave him any attention. "If you're putting up with it, Carrera, I guess I'll quit being so selfish too. I'm a little tired anyway, so I'll just sit back and watch this time." Ultima, out of nowhere, was now seated next to Carrera, Varen nimbly setting up a chair for her. The demons were growing in number, and they weren't alone. Now Shion, Soe, and Benimaru were appearing from their gates. The sight made Velgrin wince. Now, she realized, every powerful force on her side was defeated. So Testarossa had a tactical victory, and Ludora's and Velgrin's hopes were all about to be crushed, shifting perspectives from the skies to the ground. The battlefield was experiencing a very sudden and very rapid cool-down. In the midst of it, Laplace was running toward Kigali, Vega accompanying him. The forbidden curse Dead Birthday had long ceased functioning, or, to be exact, Kigali lost control of it when Velgrin stopped helping her out. Nobody knew how many walking dead the spell produced, but it'd be some time before they became active. If they had the right will inside their minds, these walking dead could work as powerful warriors from the moment of creation. It was vital that they took them into their command before anyone else could. And if Laplace thought so, he couldn't have been the only one. Lieutenant Kondo had led this ritual, and it was impossible that he wasn't aware of this. I knew he was up to something. By the time Laplace reached the scene, a group of Imperial officers was in the midst of carrying Kigali and her entourage into a military vehicle. "Oh, were you Laplace? I heard you were pretty strong. Do you think a fight's inevitable here?" He was approached by a kind-looking man wearing a differently colored uniform. Lieutenant Kondo certainly struck a figure in his white outfit, but this man's bright red uniform looked out of this world. He didn't look too strong, though. His face looked oddly fake, like a doll, and you could have pegged him as either male or female. If it weren't for that flashy uniform, he was far too ordinary-looking to leave any strong impression. But then, maybe the uniform just made everything else about him look plain by comparison. "Yeah," Laplace replied as he thought about this. "I'm Laplace. If you guys would let that girl go back, I don't think we need a fight any longer, do we?" He. "I'm not so sure that's possible. See? There's a fight over there right now. I can't just run away from here." The man was willing. Laplace, seeing no other option, took up a fighting stance. "Well, if you want, then. But who are you?" If he'd tell him, that'd certainly be helpful. "Me? Well, yeah, it's probably natural that you don't know. I am ranked 10th within the Empire, the man supporting Imperial history, and my name is Feldway." This man, Feldway, was permanently stationed within the Empire, expected to function as a space in the unlikely event that one of the single digits dropped out. Laplace had heard stories about him, but this was their first meeting. "Oh, are ya? The man they call the Space, huh? I am not a man. For that matter, I'm not a woman either." Sounds complicated. Laplace eyed Feldway as they conversed. He seemed in his element, not uncomfortable at all. He didn't look ready for a fight, but he wasn't ready to flee either. He was hard to grasp. "Leave this to me," the impatient Vega said. "I'll crush that bastard with my bare hands." He was about to step forward when Laplace hurriedly stopped him. "Whoa, hang on. I told Ya not to get ahead of me, didn't I? We can't take any risky chances while the directors held hostage. Footman and Tear were alive and well, too, still fighting hard against the crowds around them. If they were called away, it'd be hard to tell how that would affect the battle." Laplace was cautiously trying to feel out the other side, but then he was interrupted by an unexpected visitor. "Vega, lend me a hand here. Laplace is a traitor. We got to take care of him right here." Laplace immediately fled the scene, sensing a murderous rage. The voice that reached his ears belonged to Yuuki Kagurazaka, his erstwhile boss, but what it said wasn't exactly what Laplace wanted to hear. "Boss, snap out of it. Being controlled by someone else like this, it's just not like you." Yuki had defined Maribel's mind domination and lived to tell the tale. With his mental strength, he should have been able to resist any kind of mind control, but Laplace's plea went unheeded. So Yuki attacked Laplace, showing no hesitation in his movements. The bewildered Vega, seeing this, smiled his happy, distorted-looking smile. "Really, boss? Once you get rid of him, is it okay if I eat him up?" "Sure thing. I'm all for whatever makes you stronger." "Thanks, boss. I'm so glad you understand." That was Vega's philosophy. Always stick to the stronger one. Never any sense of ethics or morality in his mind. He preferred living more on instinct, like a wild animal. Thus, without even feeling that this was an evil deed at all, he gleefully launched his attack against Laplace. If it had been either him or Yuuki alone, Laplace could have dealt with that. At the same time, even for him, that was asking a lot. Shh, I ain't a fan of this at all. I was trying to save the chairman and now I'm about to get myself killed. Better leave now. Strategically, Laplace was absolutely correct. But it wasn't going to happen. Don't bother trying to escape. Your name was Laplace, right? You're as cunning as you are cautious. You're too dangerous to let free, so I think we'll have you die here instead. Just as Feldway warned, Laplace's teleportation failed. He had been observing all of this so far, but now he had cast dominant space over this battle zone, preventing Laplace's escape. Damn you! Vega launched a flurry of spirit blasts, timing it with an intense kick attack from Yuuki. He was more brawn than brains, but no one could deny his battlefield senses. Laplace's escape route was blocked, his chances of victory very small, or non-existent really, as long as Yuuki was there. No dice, huh? The end of the road. But Laplace still had no intention of giving up that easily. Betting on the ever-so-slight possibility that he could break Yuki's mind control, he decided to reveal the true power he was hiding this whole time. Die! Damn idiot! You're the dead man! He kicked at Vega, who was lumbering up to him even as Yuki kept up his attacks. That made it impossible for Vega to stand up for a little while. Not bad. Yeah. Not as good as you, boss, but I'm pretty strong too, you know? I know, so I'll at least kill you by my own hand, okay? An ever so tiny feeling of discomfort. The moment Laplace felt it, he stared intently at Yuki's face. It was the same one he always knew, and that left him open. So caught up in his own thoughts, Laplace was too late to react to Yuki's fist. No, he screamed in his heart, but the pain never came. Right before his eyes, someone had put a hand in to stop the strike. Dear me. This is the fault of all of you, do you realize? It was Diablo. What do you mean? Laplace almost asked before realizing now wasn't the time. Diablo, you came to save me? What? Why would I? Well, yes. Laplace, was it? Yes, I have come to save you. So please make it very clear to Sir Rimuru that you saved me when you see him, all right? Diablo's face went from sheer disgust to a breezy smile. I ain't never seen a more suspicious smile than that. Laplace knew a thing or two about leering smiles, so to him, Diablo was a real impressive piece of work. This, of course, wasn't meant as a compliment. All right. I'll be sure to tell Sir Rimuru that you helped me out a whole lot, okay? Wonderful! Now, to actually save you. The moment Rimuru spotted Diablo, he marched up and said, "What the hell are you doing here?" In the middle of this epic battle, he was just sitting back and watching Rimuru fight. He deserved to get yelled at, and while he had the excuse of being there to protect Rimuru, since he seemed to have completely forgotten about that order, Diablo didn't dare bring it up. Really, Rimuru was the only person in the world who could handle someone as selfish as Diablo, and he had just proven it once again. So Diablo was ordered to go to work, and after Moss gave him his report, he rushed right over here. Not to save Laplace per se, but to take out anyone down here who looked suspicious. Lucky thing I could make this man owe me a favor. Now I'll restore my good name in Sir Rimuru's eyes. Already Diablo was assuming he had won. All right. Yuki is allied with us, so I'll let him off the hook, but... Oh, is this a mystic lord before me? I know you've been aiming for this world a very long time, but, you've joined forces with Ludora? Diablo's gaze stopped at Feldway, who was flashing a thin smile. It disappeared as he sized up Diablo and scowled. "And you are Noir, are you?" Kondo's investigation said a primal was serving the demon Lord Rimuru, but I see that's true all along. I now have the name Diablo, and I don't care what you decide to do, but stand in Sir Rimuru's way and I won't show you any mercy. If you want to antagonize me, I'd suggest you come well prepared. Oh, look at you! This accursed devil who's constantly getting in our way. Feldway glared at Diablo, his intense hatred palpable. The murderous intent alone would have killed a normal person instantly, but Diablo was wholly unconcerned, laughing his taunting laugh at Feldway. "Ah, whatever. Even if I fought you here, there's no chance that I'd win." "Don't worry. It would be just as impossible for me." After a couple more pointed glares, Feldway was the first to speak. "I'll leave for today. But the next time you get in my way, Diablo, I hope you realize what comes next." "Mum?" "Well, since you were kind enough to remember my name, I won't pursue the matter any longer. But do keep in mind that I have the means to kill you. Do you understand?" With that, the two of them glared at each other again. Then, as if their business was now done, they moved on, ignoring each other's presence. Feldway acted first, giving out orders to Kigali and Yuki. "I am worried about His Majesty. We're returning to the flagship, so get ready at once." Yuki, watching all of this unfold, got out of his fighting stance. Vega unsteadily stood up, following Yuki over to Kigali. Footman and Tear were also called back, and through Feldway's dominate space, everybody, including the newborn walking dead, was teleported away. Diablo remained on the scene, conferring with Moss. Now that he knew their enemy was a mystic lord, he decided that he was the only one who could fight back against him. So he resolved to clean up this mess, as reluctant as he was about it. With Footman and Tear retreating, the battle on the ground came to an end. After confirming that everyone was safe, he attended to the injured as needed. Moss was both quite competent at this and connected to Benimaru, so Diablo decided his work was done after that. Once Feldway and the others left, he teleported himself up to the flagship. Laplace, meanwhile, was left all alone. "Great, left behind again," he muttered, shrugging. Epilogue. Sister and brother. I'd chowed down on Velgrind, and things were a lot calmer. Now that I had the time to look around, I surveyed the battlefield. The forest was pretty badly damaged, but our capital city of Rimuru appeared to be safe at least. Everywhere around it was now an empty lot, and there was some damage here and there, but Geld and his forces did a good job protecting it for me. That was a relief. "So, what are you doing here?" Sir Rimuru. You see, I was making sure that nobody would get in your way. I felt like someone was watching me during that whole battle against Velgrind. It was annoying, to be honest, but I didn't really have the time to attend to it. So, here we are. I definitely felt like I deserved to complain. All right, fine. But everyone else is working their asses off right now, so you go join them. Yes, my lord. He gave me a sad puppy dog look before leaving. I really do have no idea what's going on in his head sometimes. I imagine he was watching your battle, Master, under the auspices of preventing anyone else from interfering. Frankly speaking, it was unnecessary. Seal sounded just as fed up with Diablo. Talk about bitter. But regardless, now I could chill out a bit and go back to dealing with Velgrind. It'd be up to Veldora to explain matters to her and hopefully see things our way. When I checked in with him, I found that Veldora was basically blaming me for everything. Oh, I thought, why do I have all these problem children working for me? I assumed he was trying to deflect Velgrind's rage by making me out to be the bad guy. My sister, I wanted to tell you that I was safe, but Rimuru didn't let me. But now that we're in the same position, you'll understand what I'm saying, right? That kind of thing. It was like a spoiled child blaming his friends because he didn't want to get yelled at. It was clearly a mistake to leave the persuasion effort to Veldora. But considering the fit of rage Velgrin had after thinking Veldora was dead, I can understand why he wouldn't want to show his face around her. I get that, but did you have to blame it on me? All you're doing is pushing all the trouble on me instead. I asked him to persuade her, but now she's going to be even more critical of me. It's pointless. So, yeah, I couldn't leave Veldora in charge any longer. I needed to explain to Velgrin that she was in the same position as Veldora right now. Before that, I have something to report. What's that? As I was analyzing Velgrind, I found out that she was under the domination of someone, possibly Ludora. I can lift the influence on her, but what would you like to do? Oh, come on! Way to drop another bombshell on me. This report was given out super casually, but really, I didn't even know how to reply. I knew that CL would run analyze and assess on Velgrin, so I wasn't too surprised, but Velgrin was being mind-controlled. I couldn't take that sitting down. But you think Ludora was the culprit? It is all but certain. I had observed the battle between Carrera and Tatsuya Kondo through the Soul Corridor, and Kondo was similarly under Ludora's control. I assume the case is the same with her. After getting some more details, I found that Granite, who was paired with Benimaru, basically admitted to all of that. Pretty stupid guy the Empire had on their side, huh? Better use him as a lesson on what not to do. But we can deal with that after I return. The question at hand was about what to do with Velgrind. Veldora was proving to be an unreliable ally, so I thought about explaining matters myself, but if she was under Ludora's mental influence, she was more than likely not gonna listen to me. So, now what? Since we've gone through the trouble of taking her in, why don't we appoint Velgrind the same position as Veldora? You mean, like, connecting a soul corridor to her like I did with Veldora? And then I'll make her into an ultimate skill? Is that even possible? Not a problem. You are now equivalent to at least a true dragon, Sir Rimuru, and you have more than enough magicules for the job. I think it is possible enough for you to take in Velgrind, but wouldn't doing that take away Velgrind's free will? Guess not, huh? Not like I can force Veldora to do anything. I have to ask, and he goes ahead with it if he approves. Or really, he just does whatever he wants. Even now, he's clearly not afraid to sell me out to save his own skin. Then I have to punish him by taking his snacks away, but really he gives me such a hard time. Even if he did something really bad to me, it was no longer possible to take his freedom away. I can stop the energy supply, but I can't just make Veldora disappear with a snap of my finger. Plus, with all the magicules a true dragon has, you can't just do away with that in any normal manner. As long as Veldora's not on board with it and goes back to confinement voluntarily, he's free to do what he wants. So, basically, there's no compelling him to do anything. When he's freed, I can't bend his will, really. Remembering that, I realized that Velgrin would probably be the same way. If I gave her the same status as Veldora and freed her like that, I bet it'd be the quickest way to prove my innocence. I wouldn't be further misunderstood and exposed to these falsehoods about me. And if these two siblings have a fight, well, that's not my problem. That's not really in my job description. All right, then. Let's put her in the same state as Veldora. If you're still anxious, would you like me to place some restrictions on Velgrin? Restrictions? Is that even doable? Yeah, considering what lies ahead, maybe we need to set things up so she can't disobey me or whatever. But that's kind of against my principles. If I fail to get Velgrin over to my side after, it's better for everyone involved if I keep her isolated in complex space. Forcing her into anything would just make me the same as Ludora. If she doesn't cooperate with me, then fine. As long as she promises not to interfere with us, I have no problem with her going out and living wherever she wants. Very well. That's your style, after all. So my policy was all worked out. Let's put it into action. First, some hellos. Hello, Velgrind. How are you? Are you Rimuru? Quit messing with me! Let me out of here, right now! I had turned my attention to her within my complex space, but she was just rampaging all over the joint. I suppose, to an outside observer, this was some suspicious-looking slime approaching a beautiful woman. I looked like a criminal, really, though I suppose by default I could look like a pretty girl of 16-ish, having her way with an older, bewitching beauty. It was all kind of iffy either way, but I had no choice. Within my image, I held my hand out toward Velgrind. Feeding on Ludora's power over her, I unlocked it and connected a soul corridor up as I did. There are doors on both sides of this, so I made it impossible for her to communicate with me unless she opened her heart up to me. I can talk to her, at least, so I'm hoping this effort isn't in vain. These tasks all wrapped up without any problems. It immediately made the rampaging Velgrin act a little more her age, the change sudden enough that I was more surprised than her. Rimuru, did you by chance do something untoward to my sister? Shut up, you idiot! Of course not. If you had persuaded her like I asked you to, I wouldn't have to go through any of this. We were about to have an argument right then and there. Silence. Oh, okay. My apologies. Beldora and I nodded at the same time to this outburst. To be honest, I was scared. No wonder Veldora looked so uncomfortable around her. So what is the meaning of this, Rimuru? The meaning? That's a little hard to answer. I really had no idea what to say. I can hear the voice of my separate body on the other side, but my own voice isn't reaching it. What did you do to me? Having such a beautiful woman stare me in the eye like this made my heart skip a beat. Her breath on my face made me light-headed. It smelled so good, sweet and fragrant, perhaps because she normally didn't need to breathe at all. Now is not the time for this. Belgrind is likely asking the question because she has been freed from Ludora's control. Are you a little angry at me? That is just your imagination. You think? Well, either way, better to drop this topic. Kiel gave me a full explanation, and according to it, the story's pretty simple. The Velgrin in front of me is freed from her mind control, but her separate body elsewhere is still under Ludora's thrall. Kyle had thus used unlimited imprisonment to block the flow of information from our side, although she can still receive signals from the other side. This had put the Velgrin on the other side in full-on crisis mode. She was under Ludora's control, with no idea what I was thinking. A total one-way street. I understood that CL had done something pretty amazing, but now it hardly even felt like a surprise. So if we analyze the difference between your two consciousnesses, I think I can prove to you that you were under mind control. Yeah, well done, Rimuru. My sister, you should trust in him and... Silence. Right. Beldora got reamed for that interruption, and don't tell him, but I was a little glad to see it. Now, Velgrin seemed a bit lost in thought. I guess she was trying to figure out the difference between her and the separate body, as I explained. Through the eyes of my companions, I also updated myself on what was up in the flagship. The battle was in its final stages, and something had just happened that should fully show Velgrin what's going on. My friends had Velgrin surrounded. Kind of a coward move, you could argue, but only if you didn't know what the deal was. The fact is, even in her weakened state, we could all dogpile on her at once and still have trouble winning. However, with the alternate dimension she created now crumbling apart, the whole thing was about ready to collapse. Or it would have, but then Diablo came along and just destroyed it with a few whacks. Moi. No, his name's Diablo. Pretty competent guy when I'm not around for him to ogle.
Qua!
He gives me treats, you know. I rather like him. So Veldora sold out to him, huh? Better not treat it too seriously the next time he praises Diablo. As we continued to watch, the Velgrind on the other side took a step back as if to protect Ludora. Despite how things were going, he was still seated in his chair, all composed. That's a lot of guts. Oh, is it confidence? But as I watched, someone went on the move. It was Carrera, wielding a golden handgun, and she promptly shot Ludora with it. But the bullet was... Oh, is that the bullet that weakened me? It's a judgment bullet, the most powerful one Kondo has. He can only shoot it once a day. So why does Jorn have it? I knew what was going on because Seal told me. Not Jorn. Her name's Carrera. I guess she beat Kondo, and then he asked her to take care of Ludora for him. Not Kondo, too, Velgren muttered. But events were now unfolding fast. Ludora! The other Velgrin shouted loudly, arms outstretched to protect Ludora. Her god-level velocity was in time to catch the bullet. I got to hand it to her. She's a monster. But the judgment bullet was no pushover either. It penetrated Velgrin in the right shoulder, blew her entire right arm off, and then hit Ludora anyway, going as fast as ever. But, shockingly, Ludora was unhurt. He remained totally composed, as if he knew all along Carrera's attack would be in vain. What the heck? How could he just cancel out that attack? I don't know. I saw a glimpse of a barrier, but it's hard to believe that any barrier could completely stop it. Veldora and I were both surprised. Velgrin was just as incredulous, whispering why. As she sat down on the spot, hands on the ground.
Whoa, what's the matter, my sister?
Your friend was right, she muttered at the panicked Veldora. I really was under Ludora's control. Then she began telling us about Ludora. According to her, he had an ironclad protection system keeping him safe, something that could never be destroyed no matter who you threw at it. But there was a condition. The barrier's energy source was the loyalty of the Emperor's subjects and associates, so he needed people to remain loyal to him. That, and there was a flaw to it. Although the barrier was perfect and always on, Ludora couldn't take any action while it was activated. This was Castle Guard, one of the greatest features of the ultimate skill Michael, Lord of Justice. It had just stopped Carrera's judgment bullet, so clearly he was all but invincible. He can't attack while it's on, but he could just have his associates handle the battle instead. If he had that kind of power, my sister, you didn't need to step up to protect him, did you? Yeah, I was just thinking that... No, replied Velgrind. Normally I should have pretended to protect him and used that as a feint for an attack. But if that's how I acted instead... If the other Velgrin was laying down her life needlessly to protect Ludora, there was no doubting it. Our Velgrin now understood that she had been mind-controlled. Ludora, meanwhile, remained safe in his castle guard, immobile as it stayed activated. Or he should have been. Velgrin shouted out first, but we were all in a state of shock. Removing castle guard for just a moment, Ludora had just stabbed the chest of Velgrin, who had run up to him despite her missing arm. It almost looked like she did that on purpose. Oh, yes, that man, my beloved Ludora, is no more. Tears fell from her eyes. As if to prove it, Ludora laughed loudly. Velgrind, you should be honored to be of service to me. I will put your power to good use. As he spoke, the other Velgrin crouched down in pain. That was Yuuki's life-stealer skill. Ludora, or Michael, I suppose I should say, has the power to control the abilities of whatever he controlled. Wow, what a cheater! Veldora and I exchanged looks. Okay, how about I have you fight Ludora? What? Don't be ridiculous. There's no need to argue with you about whether I'm the strongest yet again, but I don't want to deal with someone who looks like such a pain in the rear. I'll make you a parfait for dessert. That is tempting, but Velgrin looked at us dumbfounded as we tried to palm the job off on each other. It made her stop crying, at least, which I was glad to see. Anyway, Ludora now had Velgrin's power. What did you mean when you called him Michael? I had an idea, but I wanted to hear it from her mouth. Ludora, you see, he reached his limits long ago. He reincarnated himself so many times that it wore his soul out. What you see there is Ludora, but it's also not. He's long been replaced by Michael, Lord of Justice. She looked sad about it. Oh, but how can a skill born from the desire of its owner not even cause harm to that owner? No, it's not like that. Michael was a power given to him by Veldanava. It was Uriel, Lord of Vows, that Ludora acquired out of his own volition. And now that my elder brother Veldanava is still not resurrected, that ultimate skill has gone missing. Oh, I guess I have that one, don't I? But now doesn't seem like an apt time to mention that. Velgrin went on to explain that, basically, Ludora's repeated reincarnations may have weakened the power of his soul enough that it made Michael impossible to control. She made it sound like the skill had betrayed him, but really, it felt like something different to me. Indeed, if I were in the same position as Michael, Lord of Justice, I would aim to revive you, my true master, even if it meant taking over a temporary host. That's what I thought. As a Manas, I knew that CL would never give up on something, no matter how impossible the challenge might be. I couldn't help but understand Michael's thinking as a result. But that doesn't mean I accepted it. Well, we can't let this be. Michael's probably evolved into a Manas with free will. And if he has, then what he's trying to do is the exact opposite of what Ludora aimed for. Manas. What is that? Wait! Rimuru, you think Michael is trying to do something? Well, he's trying to resurrect Veldanava, isn't he? And I think he'd be willing to make all kinds of sacrifices to achieve that. That, I explained, was why we couldn't let this slide. I could see Velgrin's face go pale. And then at that exact moment, someone new showed up and did something to the Velgrin facing Ludora right now. That is the mystic Lord Feldway. Diablo let him go because he reasoned that he couldn't defeat him, but it seems he has returned without his friends. If Diablo can't beat him, he must be pretty damn powerful. Or maybe he just didn't want to put in any more hard work today. Well, Feldway was good, using dominate space to attack in ways even an awakened demon lord would have trouble resisting, and he was aiming it all at the other Velgrin. Wounded and weakened, she didn't look like she had any way to resist it. My dimensional transfer has erased Velgrin from this world. Now there are only 2 true dragons left. A good sign for the future, eh, Ludora? Or should I say Sir Michael? Now Feldway was calling him Michael too. Velgrin's guess was just proven true. Despite the suddenness of all this, Benimaru and Diablo tried to react as quickly as they could. I hurriedly sent a thought communication over to stop them. There were still too many question marks about the Mystic Lord's abilities, but I also wanted to see how Ludora Michael would react. Besides, I could see it. Some kind of weird substance that escaped from Ludora's body. It was clinging to the limp body of Velgrin as if trying to protect it. The substance was all gone from Ludora's body, and the result of that was, not bad. Velgrin's power is now my own, and Ludora is gone. Now all that remains is to capture the power of Veldora and Velzard, and his resurrection will be complete. Ludora Michael accepted this as a matter of course. Now we were sure of it. My enemy was Michael, not Ludora, and his goal was to fully revive Veldanava, the Star King Dragon. Wonderful news indeed, Sir Michael. Yes, and Velzard will not be hard to deal with, but Veldora could prove more troublesome. They kept talking for a bit, wholly unconcerned about Benimaru and the others, but that's to be expected. Shion, Testarossa and the other allies I didn't stop all tried to attack, but Castle Guard blocked everything. Feldway, of course, was also protected and unharmed. Real bad news. But enough about that. Ludora, that's Ludora, right? There's a piece of him, a piece of his soul right there. I thought only I could see it, but I guess Velgrin could sense it too. I wasn't sure if she could or not, but I suppose she was trying to track down whatever was left of Ludora. Here, calm down, silence. I have to go now, or else it'll disappear. She begged me like a child, crying out in anger. I used Mind Accelerate to stretch out time for us. It was now exclusively me and Velgrin. Listen, calm down. If you go out right now, you'll just have your mind taken over by Ludora again. But she probably knew where he had been sent off to, but she was headed right for a dead end. There was no guarantee that she could return to this world, and saving Ludora was beyond a dream at this point. Pretty much impossible. There is no way out for you like this. Shut up. And what do you want me to do? I can't just give up on Ludora like this. Those were Velgrin's true feelings, and now she was exploding with so much rage that she didn't realize it was Seal talking, not me. There is a possibility. If you accept my ability adjust. Ah, sweet temptation. I didn't need to ask her twice. I'll take it, if it'll make my wish come true. I figured there was no way she'd ever say anything else. The moment Velgrin agreed to it, a voice rang out. Velgrin's will is confirmed. The first thing we're going to do is cut out the interference on Ragwell, Lord of Relief. Velgrin began to feel more at ease as she heard the voice. She scrutinized her own body, following the voice's instructions, and sure enough, there it was. Ragwell, emblazoned deep inside her heart core, was being subjected to some kind of interference. It was blocked now, but there's no doubting that it was dangerous to leave that in there. This was the cause of it. Now Velgrin realized it, and she also remembered that the ultimate skill Michael, King of Justice, had a power that was a sort of counterpart to Regalia Dominion. It was something I had heard about a long time ago, too. The powers created by Veldanava, in the pure form, are referred to as angelic. All of them cannot resist the absolute control of Michael, a thrall known as Ultimate Dominion. Velgrin's Ragwell is no exception to this. A very narrow corridor had been built connecting it to Michael, and it was impossible for her to escape its influence. That's right. How could I have forgotten? Anyone with an angelic, ultimate skill could never disobey my older brother. He hated that most of all, and that was why he exchanged it for Ludora's Uriel. Now she understood why she was being controlled. Her brother Veldanava had constructed this whole system, and it was next to impossible to resist it. No, there really isn't any way out, is there? Rimuru was right, and Velgrin wanted to cry her eyes out over it. But just as she was about to give up, she heard a strange voice. Preparations for Ragwell, Lord of Relief, are now complete. I will merge this with the no longer needed Uriel, Lord of Vows. Velgrin almost shouted out loud. It was only natural that Uriel, which she sought out for Ludora's sake, would be found here. And now Velgrin realized that the voice she had been hearing was no longer Rimuru's. She wasn't just hearing things. It was a clear, powerful, strong-willed voice. It was very similar to the world language, but softer and more refined. It even had a little tenderness to it. She had a lot of questions for it, but what mattered now was the meaning behind its words. Wait a minute. Are you going to give me Uriel? Or what did you mean by merge? If it has no choice but to follow Michael's will right now, then all we have to do is modify it. I discovered a control corridor in Uriel as well, so while I discard it, I thought I would use it as food to create a new ability with, exclusively for you. It was absurd, an answer full of silly nonsense. But Velgrin only cared about one question. If I do that, can I go look for Ludora? I affirm that it is possible. If it was, there was no need to hesitate. Velgrin gave her consent with all the hope in her heart. Velgrind, I have already confirmed your intention, so there is no need to give your consent a second time. I will now activate ability adjust. That voice, Seal, had no intention of stopping. The moment it launched ability adjust, an unbelievable surge of power swept through Velgrin's body, gently enveloping her. Velgrin, the Flame Dragon's Rhaegal, and Uriel will be merged to create the ultimate skill Thugga, Lord of the Fire God, succeeded. Seal declared it to the world in its solemn, otherworldly voice. And at that moment, Velgrin was freed from all her yokes. When I nodded my agreement with Seal's words, my Uriel was transferred over to it. I'm not sure if it's my fault for giving the permission, but I think it's only natural that I was so stunned. Like having Uriel be the bond that links us as friends. Not a problem. The Uriel that was merged is only a remnant. Its essence has been taken over by the new skill Shub-Niggurath, Lord of Abundance. What? I had a million questions to ask about this. Something told me that Seal was doing all kinds of amazing things without my knowledge. I was almost afraid to ask, but either way, Velgrin deserved my attention. Everything had worked, and I was glad about it. Congratulations, Velgrin. Now it's safe to release you outside. I smiled as I spoke to her. She just stared back at me, face all contorted. I think I understood why, so I looked away from her. There are so many questions I really want to ask you, but I'll skip them for now. So, are you going to let me go? It no longer seemed like an issue, so I nodded. Ciel informed me that since Velgrin now had Uriel, she would be able to pick up on and react to Ludora's soul, allowing her to potentially find and retrieve the fragment she saw. Hearing that, I began to wonder if the remnant seal mentioned was the core of Uriel, which took the shape of Ludora's own heart. It'd mean that Velgrin would always be with Ludora. If his soul was now scattered all over the world, I'm not sure she'd ever truly find it, but something told me that she might just pull it off. Okay, now release. So the three of us returned from the spiritual world to the real one. Time was still stretched out for us as we said our goodbyes. Thank you, Rimuru. I'm sorry for all the trouble. Yeah, I hope so. I got a lot of complaints about you too, but I kept my mouth shut since I didn't want her to get angry. I'm sure you can connect with your parallel existence now, so I don't think you need to worry about getting lost. After that, I know things are gonna be tough for you, but good luck. I tried to be as safe as possible with my support. But, my sister, please don't forget, if things don't work out, I'll always be here. So don't wail in despair. Just do the best you can. Veldora had a big smile on his face. I can't believe how terrible he is at reading people's moods. Velgrin seemed at a loss for how to respond. You really are stupid, aren't you? Ah, my stupid, cute little brother. I'm glad you're all right. She smiled shyly. Then she stared back at me again. Don't ask me why. When someone that beautiful looks at me up close, I get so nervous that I can't even move. She just shook her head in exasperation as my heart raced. Well, see you later. And with that, Velgrin elegantly teleported away. Okay. Next up was giving some support to Benimaru and the gang. You're going too. But of course. Less than a minute had passed. The attack on Michael was still in progress, with nothing working against Castle Guard, but they were still doing the right thing. The moment they stopped attacking, the enemy would fire back. That's why Benimaru and Diablo were dutifully watching from the sidelines without stopping Shion and the rest. We had only 2 enemies left, and I sure wanted to defeat them here, but unfortunately, that was impossible. As long as Castle Guard was in place, nothing would work against Michael. But then the same was true for us. How weak of you. None of your attacks will work on Sir Michael. Feldway, laughing loudly, was about to take advantage of the time between attacks to activate his skill. A mystic lord is more than just a fancy name, apparently. He was trying to throw all of my friends into an alternate dimension. Goodbye, everyone. I'm sure we won't meet again, but...
What?
But I was waiting for my moment to strike, too. I chose that moment to appear over there, blocking Feldway's move. Demon Lord Rimuru. Mystic Lord Feldway. Good to meet you. The smile disappeared from his face at my sarcastic response. Some country hick with no understanding of etiquette? I don't need to be told that by an aggressor who's dying to live in the big city. My continued provocation made his face freeze up. I guess he's the type who likes to keep letting his anger build without ever snapping. The worst type of guy to deal with. At that moment, Michael, silently listening on so far, interrupted us, looking as composed as usual. Hey, weren't you hiding and observing me? I thought you were sacrificing your friends in order to find a way to attack us. He was more than half right, except for the sacrifice part. Not that I cared. Think whatever you want about me. You wanna settle this here? Bold of you! But do you really think you can beat me? I dunno. But I'll give you a warning. I know that your ability gives you absolute control over angelic skills, and that there's no breaking Castle Guard as long as someone believes in you. Along those lines, couldn't we take away that advantage if I burned your empire to the ground and killed every living thing inside it? That was a total bluff. Not even I had any intention of going that far. But if I put that on the scales with having my friends be sacrificed, I'd do it without hesitation. That much cruelty I had resigned myself to long ago. I suppose I've underestimated you as well. Perhaps I shouldn't have been hostile to you after all. Maybe not, no. Your lofty ideals and noble missions weren't any of my business. I sympathize with some of your goals, too. So, as long as you didn't bother me, you could have done whatever you wanted. But it's too late now. Now that Michael was running amok, he was definitely a potential disaster for us. We were good for now, but Keel was already predicting an unavoidable conflict of interest in the future. It was my job to believe it and act accordingly. Michael fell silent, thinking over something, so I decided to spell out my intentions. If you try to touch me or any of my people, I'll crush you so thoroughly that you'll never be able to try anything so stupid again. That, and I wanted to strike some fear into him. No, I had no way to break his castle guard right now, but I had my trusty partner, Keel, helping out, and I was sure it'd figure out a way. Besides, if he touched any of my precious friends, I'd show him no mercy. No matter what it took, I swore I would defeat Michael. All right. I see. Then let's retreat for now. Are you sure, Sir Michael? Feldway looked surprised, but Michael placidly nodded his head, indicating his intention to retreat. It is too early for us as well, after all. If we fight here, it will end badly for both of us. I agreed with that. If I followed through on my earlier threat, maybe we'd have a chance of winning. But that's against my principles. I know I was just kicking the can into the future, but I really wanted some more time to work with. Okay, well, shall we all leave then? Very well. Still, today is the day of my full revival, a day to be celebrated, and instead we're given this unexpected ordeal. I thought Guy Crimson would be our biggest barrier, but instead it's slime we dismissed as insignificant. With those words, Michael and Feldway left, and I assumed they weren't going back to the Empire either. My observation magic Argos, the eye of God, wasn't picking anything up over there, and Moss reported nothing unusual. Damn, this is annoying, though. I don't even know where they went. Benimaru smiled at my offhand remark. But as you ordered, Sir Rimuru, all of us are safe. Why don't we celebrate that for now and return home? Good idea. Right. Home it is, then. I'm tired out today, and I'm feeling kinda hungry, too. Why don't we ask Shuna to prepare something nice for us all? A feast, then? Also a good idea. I nodded back at Veldora. Okay, let's go back and have a blast. My words brought smiles to everyone's faces. We had some work left to do, but at least we were all here and well enough to celebrate our survival. Velgrin continued her journey. Yesterday, today, and tomorrow, she walks on, never stopping. The place she flew to after leaving Rimuru was another world, in another time. Feldway had sent her parallel existence to the rift between this world and that one, and she safely reintegrated herself with it right there. This was a planet without any land, much less an atmosphere, and Velgrin was stranded on it without any sense of time at all. She would have died instantly if she wasn't a true dragon, but she had both dominate space and an infinite lifespan. She had time to think before she found refuge. Her thinking had almost stopped entirely after all the unbelievable events that occurred to her. There was just too much information to process. But being adrift in another dimension helped her regain her composure too. So, Velgrin thought, the sheer volume of mind-blowing data had made her abandon thinking at one point, but now she thought as long as time allowed her to. Then she arrived at the most important fact of all. How did she gain her freedom against the system her brother created? That was the question, and there was only one person she could think of who could have made that happen. Yes, that easygoing slime, the demon Lord Rimuru, her foolish brother's ally. No, it can't be. That slime is. Someone who freely tinkered with ultimate skills, gave Velgrin her freedom, and massively improved her own powers, evolving them to greater heights. No regular human could possibly have done any of that. Only my brother Veldanava could do anything so outlandish, if it were possible for anyone else at all. Velgrin shuddered at the impossible thought. When she turned her attention to it, her ultimate skill, Thokka, Lord of the Fire God, reacted, power on an incomparable level from Ragwa. But most of all, the fragments she had been taking in reacted as if linked to Ludora's heartbeat. Well, I don't care what that slime really is. He's just Rimuru, Veldora's ally and the one I owe my life to. That was the conclusion she arrived at, and with that, Velgrin broke out of her thought loop and turned her attention back to reality. So Velgrin continued collecting pieces of his soul as she traveled through worlds and eras. I love you, Ludora. That all-consuming desire to see Ludora drove her to overcome a cavalcade of obstacles. And then, finally, in a big city lined with skyscrapers, she found the boy. Joy and determination. The boy was everything she lacked. And if Velgrin gave him the rest of the pieces she had, but was this really okay to do? She agonized over the question. If she did it, it drastically changed the boy's destiny. Her lifespan was infinite. She could continue to watch over him until he lived out his own life. Yes, no reason to panic. I can't wait to see you, but it won't help me to hurry things along. But then, a shining piece of his soul flew over to the boy. This fragment, noticed by nobody, fused itself within him, as if sucked inside, and with that shock the boy disappeared from the world. All that remained in Velgrin's hand was the very first fragment she found. Were you one of them too? Did you want to see me? Velgrin spoke to the fragment, wishing it were true. Then she activated Suha to pursue the boy. Afterword. Once again I was able to deliver volume 15 to you without any trip-ups. When I went over the deadline last volume, I might have said to myself something like, better be a little more careful next time. But unfortunately, I was late by around 10 days this time as well. I really want to reflect more on that, and next time I'll try to be just a little bit more careful than that. In fact, however, I had actually discussed this issue with my editor, from pretty early on. I think it might be a little tight. Well, let's do our best. We can't make it to be continued thing. That's pretty much how the last volume was, so I'd like things to wrap up more nicely this time. True. But the page count is That's all right. I've decided that I no longer care how many pages it is. That's not what I meant, I said to myself at the time, inwardly shrugging. This volume has the largest cast of characters yet, several of whom are making their first appearance. I know I'm bucking the rules of good storytelling, but I can't help it, so I just let it slide. That's why I had to write so much more text for each scene, so I really wanted to break it up in the middle and end it in the next volume, but that got rejected. All right. Well, if that's the case, would you mind considering delaying the release date by a month? Let's keep plugging away till... So neither side gave any concessions, and time continued to pass by. I was writing with a lot of energy now, and the word count was already past volume 14's. How's it going? Mum, it really is gonna be tight. At the rate I'm going, I'm probably gonna overshoot the deadline by around 10 days. All right. In that case, I've made up my mind here. Oh, you mean you'll delay it to October? No. If we can keep it to 10 days, we'll work it out somehow, so it'll be released in September still. Are you serious? I honestly thought. Like, that's what you made up your mind about? There was no guarantee that even 10 days were enough, but his determination was unwavering. I think the page count's going to set another new record. No need to worry about that. Just do your best to make the deadline, Roger. And so, fully defeated, I somehow managed to make it on time. Thanks to that, this is the largest volume yet. So that's how we were able to get this out, but I'm anxious to see how people react to it. If you like it, nothing could make me happier. The content of this book series has now diverged so drastically from the original web novel that it's no longer an exaggeration to call it a separate work. I'm busy brainstorming for the next volume right now, so keep an eye out for it. I'd like to express my utmost gratitude to everybody who's supported and been involved with that time I got reincarnated as a slime. I hope that I'll get to see you all again in the next volume. Contents: The Abyss Unleashed. Cover. Insert title page. Copyright. Prologue. Flame Dragon against Storm Dragon. Chapter 1. The Moment of Despair. Chapter 2. Power Unbound. Chapter 3. The Battlefield Rages. Chapter 4. The 8 Impervious Gates. Chapter 5. The Truth Behind the Emperor. Epilogue. Sister and Brother. Afterword. Yen Newsletter. Navigation. Begin reading. Table of Contents. Thank you for buying this ebook published by Yen On. To get news about the latest manga, graphic novels and light novels from Yen Press, along with special offers and exclusive content, sign up for the Yen Press newsletter. Sign up or visit us at yenpress.com/book link.